Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
I'm Sophie and Wilf, good morning from both of us. Lots ahead today.
The ceasefire between the US and Iran is extended, but the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked and peace talks are cancelled.
The cost of the war is felt around the world, with Lufthansa cancelling 20,000 flights, blaming the price of jet fuel.
Pressure mounts on the PM, who will face another day of questions on the Peter Mandelson vetting process.
Later in the programme, we'll also talk to the former boss of NATO about whether he thinks that the relationship between Trump and Europe will survive.
And a new film about Michael Jackson's rise to stardom draws widespread criticism for not telling the full story. Well, good morning. Welcome to the show. We have some breaking news. Inflation has just come out for the month of March, of course, therefore taking in the war in Iran for the first time. It's come in line with expectation, we should say updated expectation, of course, in light of the war. 3.3% is the reading for CPI. February was 3%, January was 3%, December was 3.4%, and this was meant to be now the path down, with April, in fact, being at the start of the year, the month that people thought would get very close to the Bank of England's target of 2% again. So we were expected to fall below 3 when we started the year, start heading towards 2 by this point in the year. Clearly, as you can see in that chart, instead we have ticked up once again to 3.3% for the month of March. Core CPI is actually a little bit better than expected, 3.1 versus a forecast of 3.2. That strips out energy. And services inflation, though, is a little bit worse than expected at 4.5%. The forecast was for 4.3. The headline, Sophie, this was meant to be one of those months, next month in particular, that gets us back to target, close to 2. Instead, February we're at 3%, March we've risen to 3.3.
And I guess the fear is that this is the beginning of a trend rather than a blip, right?
Exactly, and I think, 3.3 from 3, you might say, in light of the war, not that bad, but, the war started in the start of the month and, energy prices, gas prices take a few weeks to respond. Now in April, what's the 21st today, so all of April will be pricing in pretty much this sort of thing. It's going to be cumulative from here.
Yeah, we're going to be talking more about the economic impact of all this, including, of course, on flights and jet fuel in just a moment. But just to bring you the latest on the war in the Middle East, because Donald Trump has announced a ceasefire between the US and Iran is being extended. It happened just hours before it was due to expire.
There was a confusing picture in Washington last night as Vice President J.D. Vance had been set to travel to Pakistan for peace talks with Iranian officials. But late last night, the White House confirmed that trip was off for the time being. So, as you would always expect at this time of the day, there have been some posts from President Trump online, just to bring you them now. He said Iran doesn't want the Strait of Hormuz closed. They want it open so they can make $500 million a day, which is therefore what they're losing if it's closed. They only say they want it closed because I have it totally blockaded. Closed, so they merely want to save face. People approached me 4 days ago saying, sir, Iran wants to open up the strait immediately, but if we do that, there can never be a deal with Iran unless we blow up the rest of their country, their leaders included, signed President Donald J. Trump. Hi, is your correspondent Cordelia Lynch is in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad. They're awaiting J.D. Vance's arrival that's not to be for at least the next 24 hours or so. What is the latest there?
Yeah, it looks like after a frantic day of diplomacy, for now at least, Wilf, talks are off. Yesterday, there was a lot of anticipation, speculation about when J.D. Vance was taking to the skies. That never came. He engaged in extra talks in the White House. There was a lot of brinkmanship, no confirmation from the Iranians. And now we know that there has been a ceasefire extended, but no commitment to the two sides getting round the table here in Islamabad. I thought it was quite interesting. Donald Trump oscillating a lot yesterday, from optimism that they would reach a deal this week to then suddenly threats of bombing yet again in Iran, to then that late night commitment to a ceasefire without a date. And I think that is quite telling and significant. So too, Wolf, is the tone of his statement on Truth Social. It was more measured than we've seen in the past. That's generally been his preferred platform for announcing his strategy and opinions on the war with Iran. And I think it signals that there is still a lot of appetite with him and in the administration to try and bring this war to a close. I think from the Iranian side, what we're seeing is a lack of trust, a lot of reluctance. They say that they'd actually reached a 10-point agreement with the US, and there had been some pointing to the fact they'd come round and they'd sort of rubber stamp that deal, if you like, here in Islamabad. And then came the US attacks on Iranian vessels, and I think that all contributed to this real concern that America were bad faith actors in these discussions, that they weren't serious about a deal and were still committed to attacking Iran. And now we're in this kind of diplomatic morass. But I think one sign of hope is that there is a ceasefire still in place, and one without a date. So I think there is room, there is scope for some kind of progress. But the blockade, the US blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, is an absolutely central sticking point. Now, Donald Trump says that will remain in place. Iran says we're not going to do any deal until you lift that. So will we see a shift on that front in the next few hours and days? That's something to really focus on, because I think until we get that, it's very unlikely to see any kind of agreement reached between the two sides. And one of the really challenging things for the American administration is knowing who exactly they are dealing with. I think Iran actually has a lot of leverage. They seem less desperate to do a deal ultimately, but Trump is trying to find out who he and his team needs to speak to, and there's a division between the civilian and the military leadership. So they need to work through that, unpick things, and ultimately they need to spend the next few days building trust. And it's looking pretty precarious from where I'm standing right now.
Cordy, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. And oil prices obviously yesterday rose significantly off the back of that. They've paused today in light of all of this, but we're back up at, what, $98 on Brent crude.
And, of course, that has a pretty massive economic impact in the UK and across the world as well. Inflation, as Wolf broke this morning, has risen to 3.3%. There's also a big impact in the airline industry as well. Lufthansa announced it's cutting 20,000 short-haul flights this summer.
They blame the cost of jet fuel for that decision, which has more than doubled, as well as labour disputes it's having with its workforce. Let's discuss all of this with our business and economics correspondent, Paul Kelso. Paul, good morning to you. First of all, recap for us that data that we got for March, the inflation data that crossed moments ago.
Yeah, the significance of the March data, it's the first month of the war. The war began, the US-Israeli attacks began on February the 28th, so this is a full month of data that the Office for National Statistics have been able to look at. We know the oil price went up, direct, immediate impact on fuel prices. Petrol and diesel have risen at their highest rate for 3 years. And that's the first bit of inflation that washes up here in the UK. So 3.3% is the consumer price inflation rate for March, driven largely, primarily, according to the ONS, by those fuel prices, because it's so pernicious fuel, because it seeps into every corner of the economy. It's not just that we feel it when we fill up our vehicles, if you are a car owner, but pretty much everything we buy, every physical good in the economy moves by road. Haulage fees have risen enormously as a consequence. There's a pretty direct feed through to the inflation numbers. Also see food inflation on the up. As well. I've been out and about this week trying to talk to some of the businesses affected. You go and talk to food manufacturers, importers. They're feeling it immediately from their haulage costs, particularly stuff. If you're eating salad at the moment from Southern Europe, it's come on a lorry. That's got £1,000 more expensive. Also into a steelworks in Cardiff. And this perhaps speaks to the next phase of the inflation story, because their costs are electricity and gas, all of which have gone up. But for the moment, aren't quite seeing in these numbers, but I talked to the boss there about what he's seeing in his costs and what might happen next.
energy prices have risen substantially. So you've got electricity alone, which is roughly 30% higher than what we originally forecasted. We've got gas, which is nearly 60% higher than what was originally forecasted at the beginning of the year. We will absorb as much as we can. For a short conflict in the Middle East, we would have absorbed the cost. Energy prices, petrochemical industries, they're all seeing the ramification of it. And yes, costs are increasing. Unfortunately, as much as we don't want to pass costs on, there will be some element of cost increase.
I guess, Paul, that's the kind of key, isn't it? That this could just be the beginning of a much deeper trend. And I just want to bring in what's happening with airlines as well, because we've seen this news through from Lufthansa. I know there's some specific issues with Lufthansa, but they are also saying that the reason that they're having to cut all these flights is because of the rising cost of jet fuel.
Yeah, unusual or occasionally surprising frankness from an enormous organisation, Lufthansa. They announced last night they're cutting 20,000 flights, short-haul flights across Europe. They say this is only going to cut 1% of seat capacity, and they're looking, by the sounds of it, to protect their summer schedules, to not spook holiday makers and protect that. But they're very directly linked. 20,000 flights, that's 40,000 tonnes of jet fuel, and the price has doubled. They spell it out in their statement. And this will be, one suspects, the first of many similar announcements if the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked, and if the supply of oil to refineries that produce jet fuel remains choked off. They have little choice but to cut their cloth. They say that their supplies are secure for now, is the phrase in the statement, which is interestingly
not that reassuring.
It doesn't say they've got enough till October, but that is the reality. Jet fuel, then diesel, then petrol. That feels like the order of supply challenge.
But I think it's the 20,000 flights cut over the summer, and that's their May to October schedule. It actually equates to 150 of their routes per day. It's so headline-grabbing, but I do think the key thing, as you pointed out there, Paul, is it's based on price doubling of fuel, not lack of supply, or so they say, though the knock-on effects obviously fairly similar for us if your flight that you usually take gets cancelled. And as you say, on seat capacity, it's quite low because it's a lot of their smaller planes doing short-haul flights that they say are already unprofitable. So that's the fact. But as you say, there could be many more. And on the note of that, just remind people, we spoke to Michael O'Leary, the Ryanair CEO, a few weeks ago, and he was talking then about when, if the war continued, it would actually affect supply of their jet fuel, not just costs.
The war continues and the disruption to supply continues. We think there's a reasonable risk, at some low level, maybe 10, 20, 25% of our supplies might be at risk through May and June. So, like everybody else in the industry, we hope that this war ends sooner rather than later. At the moment, we're reasonably certain there'll be no disruption to supply until about the middle of May. And obviously, we would hope this war will finish before the end of April, and then I think the risk of disruption will go away.
So interesting, he's talking about 20% of supply of jet fuel in Europe being, threatened for the months of May and June if it continues through April. That was on the 31st of March, and now obviously it's what is the date today? The 20th or something?
22nd.
22nd.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. 22nd of April. So,
glad we got you here.
It's, to your point, I think there could be more of these types of Lufthansa announcements as weeks go on.
Absolutely. And the challenge Europe has right now is that the shortage, the absence of that oil from the Gulf is showing up right now. The last shipments have arrived. Asia has been choked off from the very beginning of this war, but every day that passes is ships not at sea heading in this direction with oil, and this will spread. Clearly, companies like Lufthansa and others are trying to mitigate and manage it. But it is coming, and these inflation figures, which will trouble people who were expecting, as you said, inflation to be heading down, now going up. The question now is how high and how much can this be offset? How quickly will this end?
Lovely. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. We're interested to hear from you if you're being impacted by this. Are you trying to book a flight over the summer? Are you a farmer seeing increases in red diesel? Are you a small business owner who is worried about passing costs on to consumers? Let us know. mornings@sky.uk. mornings@sky.uk is the email address.
And later in the programme, we wanted to mention we're going to be speaking to the former NATO General Secretary, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, about the war. That interview's coming up after 9 a.m.
Politics now, because Keir Starmer is going to face another round of questions about the Peter Mandelson vetting scandal today after a pretty damaging day of evidence from the former chief of the Foreign Office.
Yesterday, Sir Ollie Robbins described an atmosphere of pressure in the vetting process of Peter Mandelson and said that Number 10 had taken a dismissive approach to security checks. Let's listen to some of that.
The handover briefing I was getting as I arrived at post was what I felt was a generally dismissive attitude to his vetting clearance. The focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. A position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson. I think throughout January, honestly, my office, the Foreign Secretary's office, were under constant pressure. There was an atmosphere of constant chasing. When will this?
Daily phone calls.
I couldn't say for certain daily, but I mean certainly very frequent, from private office to private office. Has this been delivered yet? Never any interest, as far as I recall, in whether, but only an interest in when.
Well, let's talk about all this now with Lucy. It was extraordinary kind of discussion points yesterday. Some of it, though, quite technical and Westminster insidery, as we often say. What of it is cutting through? What of it causes lasting problems for the Prime Minister?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And speaking to some Labour MPs yesterday, I think some of them feel potentially a little bit cushioned by the fact that some of these complexities, talking about processes, may not be cutting through to the public. Many of them very keen to say people are worried about their energy bills, what's going on with the war in Iran. But something that was raised in the emergency debate consistently yesterday afternoon, that was tabled by Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, was that this always comes back to the original decision to appoint Peter Mandelson to the role of US ambassador. Opposition leaders saying, what else did Keir Starmer need to know to make the decision that he now says wasn't the right one? Something that Ed Davey said, which perhaps hasn't been mentioned very much, and actually Oliver Robbins, giving evidence yesterday, said this. He said that if he had made the decision to turn around to Keir Starmer or ministers and say, actually, I don't think Mandelson is the right appointment, he said it would have been very, very difficult. He also admitted that it could have affected US relations, angering Donald Trump. That's something that Ed Davey said yesterday. So I do think, at the very least, what the public are reminded of is that Keir Starmer made the decision in the first place. And this is a Prime Minister that went into Number 10 and said he would end cronyism, this idea of putting your friends into powerful positions.
What's the mood among Labour MPs? How kind of mutinous, if you like, are they feeling or not?
It's interesting because actually previously we have seen Labour MPs absolutely fizzing with anger, quite certain that there is going to be a leadership contest some point soon. And actually I wasn't getting that yesterday, but that doesn't mean that this isn't a problem for the Prime Minister and that this isn't extremely damaging. They're really exasperated. They had their heads in their hands. Yesterday, again, in this emergency debate, there weren't many Labour MPs there to defend Keir Starmer. So I think what these latest revelations have done for many Labour MPs is just corroborate how they already feel. I was speaking to one yesterday. A number of them, in fact, say that while they might not be pushing the button just yet, they will be at some point. And so all this does is confirm maybe what they thought before, that Keir Starmer perhaps isn't the right leader to take them into the next election.
Lucy, Gustav, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, later this morning, we are going to be talking to the woman really at the centre of all this, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Dame Emily Thornbury. You might have seen her yesterday, grilling Ollie Robbins. She's going to be joining us in the studio at 8:15, so looking forward to that one.
Certainly are. Now, facial recognition systems will be rolled out across the country after two campaigners lost a legal challenge in the High Court.
So the case was brought over concerns it could be used in a discriminatory way by police, but the court ruled it didn't actually breach human rights law.
There are very, very few misidentifications. In 3 million people who've walked past these cameras over many years, only 12 have been misidentified. Many of those haven't even been stopped by the police because it's obvious. A few have been stopped and spoken to, none have been arrested. So it's a minuscule number. You compare that to human error when officers are doing stops without technology, it's much, much lower. This is fantastic technology that is keeping the public safe. Officers arrest more people on these operations than they do without it. And they interfere with other people's rights far less because they get it right almost every time.
Well, a lot to talk to. Our next guest about the Work and Pension Secretary, Pat McFadden, joins us now. Good to have you with us. Lots to talk about. I did actually just want to start on the inflation figures because, look, this is the kind of thing that actually impacts people in their real lives, and we've seen it ticking up, obviously, because of the war. How worried are we that this is the beginning of a trend that we're going to see throughout the year?
Well, at the start of the year, inflation was projected to fall during the course of the year. Market expectations were of interest rate cuts during the course of the year. But, of course, the war has changed the picture, and we see that most obviously in gas and oil prices. That feeds through to general energy prices. Energy is a big component of inflation, and it's also a big component of producing other things like food. So we will do our best to help the country through this period, but this rise in inflation is due to external events of which the government and the Prime Minister have not played a part. We have not been protagonists in this war, but I've got to be honest with your viewers. Even if you haven't been protagonists in the war, the country can't escape the effects of this because they're going to be worldwide.
Yeah, one of those we're seeing in airlines and jet fuel. Lufthansa saying they're cutting 20,000 flights. Can you just, and you're talking about being honest with people, what are our supplies of jet fuel? How worried should we be about that?
Historically, we've had a lot of jet fuel from the Middle East. So we have to source that from elsewhere, whether that's the United States or other countries. Airlines will do everything they can to do that. But these are the ripple effects, if you like, of something that we were not part of. We didn't choose to be part of. But again, to come back to my point about levelling with the viewers, we can't escape the consequences. The point is, the government will do everything we can to help the country through these consequences.
We could see more flights being cut and cancelled. That's the reality.
I don't want to predict. I think airlines know there's a problem. These are experienced businesses. They source from wherever they can, and they will try to find alternative supplies if supplies are not available from the usual Middle East sources.
I want to talk to you now about the evidence from Sir Ollie Robbins yesterday. It's been an awful lot of scrutiny, of course, about what happened with the Mandelson vetting. But I just wanted to start with something that we learned yesterday. Ollie Robbins claimed that Number 10 pushed for an ambassadorship for Matthew Doyle, former Director of Communications, now suspended Labour peer. Is that true?
It's the first I'd heard of it yesterday. I don't know what conversations took place between Number 10 and the Foreign Office about that, but it didn't come to anything, and I don't think Matthew had the experience to become an ambassador. So I don't know what, if he was about to leave Number 10, what conversations were taking place.
I mean, you're doing the interview today. You must have asked them. Did it happen?
Well, I don't know.
The implication is that it was Keir Starmer, right? That he was like, right, let's get this guy a nice posting.
Look, did that happen? It's not unusual if someone's leaving to say, what do you want to do next? Quite what he was asked, what he wanted to do next, I don't know.
I'm really sorry. Cause normally, I'm quite forgiving when people say, I don't know. In this situation, when it was this time, yesterday morning, you must have asked the question. Or if you didn't ask the question, it's because you wanted to come in here and say, I'm really sorry, I don't know. I don't accept that.
No, I always try to prepare, but...
So what did you do? Did you ask Number 10 what happened?
The important point for me is...
No, sorry, this is an important point for me. Did you ask Number 10 what happened?
So I'm told no appointment was made.
But
that's
did you ask Number 10... We know no appointment was made. Did you ask Number 10 if it is true that Keir Starmer asked for an ambassadorship from Matthew Doyle? Did you ask the question?
I don't think he would have been right for such a post. I think it's right that no appointment was made.
Did you ask the question?
I don't know what conversations were held with Matthew.
Did you ask the question?
What question?
Did you ask Number 10 if it's true Keir Starmer asked for an ambassadorship for Matthew Doyle? Did you ask that question?
I don't think Keir Starmer would have asked for this. I don't know what conversations...
Did you ask the question? It's a really simple... You know the answer to that question. Did you ask the question?
I have not asked if Keir Starmer asked this.
OK. And why did you not ask that? Because you wanted to come on here and say you didn't know anything about it?
No, because I don't think the Prime Minister would be in the position of picking up a phone on a personnel matter like that.
He's not an appropriate choice for that, is it? And I guess part of the reason I think that people feel frustrated about this is that Labour is supposed to be the party of equality, where, status and class doesn't matter. And what this whole saga stinks of, really, from Mandelson to Matthew Doyle, is jobs for the boys, who you know, being looked after. Do you see what I'm saying here?
The rationale for appointing Peter Mandelson. It was a political appointment. It's not the way ambassadors are usually appointed. That's unusual, but it's not unheard of. The rationale for it was you had a highly political US administration. You had a highly business-focused US administration. Here was someone that was a political operator who had been a business secretary.
And what was the rationale for pushing for Matthew Doyle to get an ambassadorship?
Well, I don't think that was a good idea, and if it happened, it came to nothing.
OK. You knew Mandelson. You worked for him, obviously, very closely in the New Labour years. And someone else who did was Ed Miliband. Yesterday, he told me, I steered well clear of Peter Mandelson when I became Labour leader, and when he found out about the appointment, he said, I was worried about it because I thought it could blow up, that it could go wrong. Were you worried when you heard about the appointment as well?
No, because I could see the rationale for it. As I said, this was an unusual appointment, a political appointment. They happen on occasion, not very often. But I could see the rationale for this appointment because you were dealing with a very new kind of US administration. Trade was going to be at the heart of a relationship with this administration. So on having a political appointment and someone with trade experience, I could see why such an appointment was made. And to be honest, so could many other people at the time of the announcement. This was not greeted with horror. He wasn't picked from disgrace or obscurity. He was a prominent figure at the time. Now, since then, an awful lot has come out that has made clear that decision was a mistake. Things in the Epstein files, possibly things in this vetting. The Prime Minister's acknowledged it was a mistake, but I'm not going to come on your programme and pretend that I didn't see the rationale for the appointment at the time.
How would you describe the mood among Labour MPs and ministers towards Keir Starmer? Do you think it's mutinous, or do you think that people...
No, I don't think it's mutinous. Look, no one wants the week to be dominated by the story that it's been dominated by for the last week. We've got local elections coming up. You know, I've got announcements today on youth employment.
I am going to ask you that.
You know, ministers want to come on and talk about whatever it is.
So what's your message then to Labour MPs who might be looking around, looking at Angela Rayner, maybe thinking Andy Burnham could have a route back in? What's your message to them? My message to them is the Prime Minister's acknowledged this appointment was a mistake, whatever the rationale was for it, which I set out a moment ago. And to be a Prime Minister is to be a decision-making machine, and they won't all be right. But that doesn't mean you ditch the leader. It doesn't mean you change Prime Minister. I think we've had too much of that in the UK in recent years. I think we need a period of keeping a Prime Minister for a period of time to let him do the job he was elected to do. This is a difficult story. It's a difficult week. And he's determined to carry on, Keir Starmer. Yes, he is. He's very resilient. You need resilience in that job. You have to go through a lot every day. But he is determined to carry on. You are here to talk about your announcement today about young people and McDonald's. What's going on? We want to get more young people into work. We have a set of policies under the banner of the Youth Guarantee to offer training, work experience, more youth apprenticeships, hiring incentives for employers who take on young people who've been unemployed. Specific thing today is McDonald's, who are one of the biggest employers of young people in the country, offering 2,500 paid work experience placements to help young people break out of this pattern of you can't get a job if you haven't got experience, and you can't get experience if you haven't got a job. And at the end of the placement, they're not guaranteed a job, but they're guaranteed an interview and a chance of a job. And I hope that other employers will step up and be part of this initiative too. Yeah, like you say, half of it is just getting through to the interview process, particularly if you've got AI weeding out CVs and all that kind of thing. I think it's really difficult for young people now. Applications are online. When I was a teenager, you could go into a supermarket, I stacked shelves, and you could ask to speak to the store manager and see if there were any jobs available. It's all online now. I did the same. I remember going up the high street and just going into a cafe or whatever it is saying, can you hire me? Or, well, the cafe you probably still could, but with some of the supermarkets and so on, you can't. So getting that first chance is important, and McDonald's is one of the key businesses in the country where young people do get that first chance. Thanks very much indeed. Good to have you on the programme. Pat McFadden speaking to us here. We're going to, of course, continue our coverage of the story on Peter Mandelson. We'll hear from a former Foreign Office diplomat about the fallout from Ollie Robbins' evidence. That's next.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighbourhood has rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty.
War isn't pretty.
Welcome back. The Prime Minister will have to defend his actions over the appointment of Peter Mandelson once again today as he faces Prime Minister's questions at midday. It'll be the third day of tit-for-tat between Downing Street, the Foreign Office and the opposition. Let's discuss all of this, and that's going to be with the former Foreign Office diplomat and defence analyst Arthur Snell, who joins us. Thanks so much for joining us, Arthur. Good to see you. Do you think the Prime Minister misled Parliament?
I don't think he did so with any intention, and it seems to me that the only real question is around the exact status of whether or not the vetting was allegedly refused or whether there was a recommendation against clearance, which is what seems to have come out of Ollie Robbins' evidence. And I clearly this is a serious question, but I'm not sure that you could really say that the Prime Minister went in to mislead Parliament.
Do you think Ollie Robbins deserved to lose his job?
No, that seems to me very odd what's happened. And I think there is a wider point here that there's a long list of very senior officials, whether we're talking about, obviously, British Ambassador, Ollie Robbins' predecessor, the Cabinet Secretary, I could go on. The Prime Minister has sacked quite a lot of senior officials, and there seems to be a bit of a pattern there.
Where do you stand on the simple question of did Peter Mandelson fail his security vetting or not, which is the trigger of the last 6 days of crazy coverage? Because the Ollie Robbins view of this was, to that blunt question, he didn't fail it ultimately.
Yeah, and that's correct. Look, I'm obviously a former colleague of Ollie Robbins. People might take a view on that, but as he says, you get the recommendation from UKSV, the vetting officials, and then the Foreign Office makes a decision. And it's worth noting that it apparently, the concerns raised in vetting didn't even relate to Epstein. And when clearly, when Mandelson was serving as ambassador, nothing he did as ambassador caused the government any concerns. What caused him to be fired was his lack of honesty about his earlier relationship with Epstein. So it seems to me that, yes, he did not fail vetting. And on a point of fact, one could argue that his actions as ambassador, I'm not defending him at all, but his actions as ambassador were not in question.
Where is the sort of state of the relationship between the civil service as a whole and the government, this government in particular? But I guess it's not the first in recent years where there's been tensions between the two.
No, it's not the first, but I think we're in a very, very poor state of affairs. Obviously, I'm in touch with lots of former colleagues. I think there's two issues here. One is that the civil service have become the people to blame for the sort of general state of affairs in the country. And of course, ultimately, civil servants don't make policies. It's governments that make policies, whether it's this government or the previous one. And that extends to economic and all the other policies. That's one point. I think the second point is this thing I alluded to earlier, that Keir Starmer seems to like to stand up and sort of appear to be tough and taking the tough decision to fire people. But one might ask, well, it's surely being able to get a team around you that can carry out your policies and can work productively is the mark of a good manager, and I'm not sure we're seeing that.
Arthur, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Now, a new film about Michael Jackson opens in cinemas today, and it's already got quite a lot of people talking.
The movie follows the singer's extraordinary rise to stardom, but makes no reference to allegations that he sexually abused children, a scandal which, of course, dominated the final years of his life.
Just a warning that this report from Katie Spencer does contain some flash photography.
17 years after his death, a new Michael Jackson movie is coming out. And if forecasters have got it right, it could gross $1 billion. Because in spite of allegations of child sexual abuse, in the last decade, Jackson's global popularity has not waned. From jukebox musicals to Spotify streams, when the singer died, he was reportedly hundreds of millions in debt. Today, his estate is valued at $2 billion.
Just have all these songs in my head.
Jafar Jackson, Michael's nephew, has earned quite a bit of praise for his performance in the new film, with the family executors heavily involved behind the scenes. It is a story emphasising Jackson's loneliness, childhood trauma and talent, skirting around the controversy by stopping at the height of his fame.
The film's original third act reportedly had included some abuse allegations, but that section had to be cut and reshot when lawyers pointed out that past legal settlements prevented all parties from talking about what did or didn't go on. With such a narrow lens on Jackson's life, there are plenty of people who hate the idea that the film will undoubtedly revive and reshape his public image.
Not least the woman who commissioned the Leaving Neverland documentary about these two men, Wade Robson and James Safechuk, detailing their alleged childhood sexual abuse by Jackson and the psychological aftermath. Former Channel 4 boss Dorothy Byrne says Hollywood should be ashamed.
It's wrong to even listen to his music, never mind go and see a film, because people are making money out of this. And that's what you have to say to yourself. You wouldn't go and see a film about Jimmy Savile that was all about him running marathons. You shouldn't go and see a film about Michael Jackson, the singer, because he's not just Michael Jackson, the singer. This film is not telling you the truth about him.
Jackson's posthumous earnings have relied on dismissing the allegations of child sex abuse, which the singer denied in life and which his executors have contested since. While we might live in the age of cancel culture, when it comes to Jackson, because his music is so beloved, is the truth that a lot of people just don't want to hear it, mentally splitting the music from the person because it's intertwined with our formative years.
Michael Jackson is the biggest star of the universe and always has been and always will be. If you start getting rid of music that's made by artists who have behaved horribly, then you're getting rid of everybody from James Brown to Wagner. Most people are sophisticated and they know if they go to see a movie, they might go, oh, this is not quite right, or there's more to the story, even though I enjoyed the movie. And then they can find out by researching this.
It is a lot harder, impossible, some might argue, to unlike music you've grown up singing along to. But when it's an artist whose life was so mired in controversy, critics argue it's wrong to buy a ticket to a movie which paints him as a character deserving of our sympathy, but stops short of taking in the alleged trauma Jackson inflicted on others. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
I think it's fair to say the reviews have been not positive. This saccharine, reverential biopic is set to be one of the worst films of 2026.
And another one, I'm looking at, reading it, giving it 1 star and scathing of how it is completely devoid of following the truth, saying that, we're using a word here that we can't use, the film is 2 hours of pure, unadulterated BS. And, I think what is particularly striking about this, as Katie was reporting, is the box office numbers are expected to be enormous.
Are they? That's interesting.
No, it's expected to do incredibly well, and the first few days apparently have met up with that. So, it shows you such a disconnect. Often the critics don't quite get it right. Often, the winners of the Oscars aren't the ones that killed it at the box office, but you don't usually see 1 star and $1 billion. So, make of that what you will, I guess.
We are talking next about hairdressers and why half of hairdressers could close. That feels like an alarming statistic. We need to try and dig down into that. We'll try and do that after the break.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent based here in Bangkok. We've been undercover inside Asia's huge network of scam centres.
This compound is, without a doubt, the worst. It is essentially hell on earth.
We cover a vast, varied and dynamic region that's shaping the rest of the world.
Okay, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch, wait, right, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera, turn around and go away. Okay, but listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw two guys, two bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war, and all around us was destruction and the sound of battle. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Welcome back. We're talking a lot about the cost of living today as inflation figures came out in the last hour, show how impactful the war of Iran is on daily life. Inflation rose to 3.3% from 3% the month before, and it includes not just those running on oil and gas, but all businesses like hairdressers.
Yeah, they've got a new survey out today showing 1 in 5 people working for salons are worried about closing, saying it's very likely within a year. 1 in 2 unsure if they'll be trading within the next 12 months. So let's speak now, shall we, to the chair of the British Hair Consortium, Colette Osborne. Great to have you with us. This survey is really, really striking. Are things that bad for the hairdressing industry?
Good morning and thank you for having me on today. Unfortunately, yes, they are. If you take me as a typical salon owner in Gedling in Nottingham, I'm surrounded, if you take your typical high street, and you've all got one of them, if you imagine 18 salons in a very short distance of half a mile, I'm the only pay-as-you-earn employer. I'm trying to do the right thing to keep people in jobs, so you're kind of, female-dominated sector, just trying to do the right thing, but the cost of living and the cost of taxes and everything has gone so high, we just cannot survive. To give you some idea of that, VAT is, we're 60% labour, and VAT is a massive part of that. NICs has gone up, national minimum wage has gone up, and I'm surrounded by and we haven't been able to put our prices up, you know, in line with inflation. So pretty much last year, well, the last 2 years, you know, it's cost the tax base £1 billion, £1 billion. So this is becoming an impossible situation. If something's not done and it's not done quick, we can say goodbye to apprentices. It's been forecast from CBI Economics that we'll have no apprentices by next year. You know, your high street will be, you know, salons will, your hairdresser, the hairdresser you love and you go and see every day, who's your kind of the community hub, will be disappearing. And these are normal working people like me, like all the people I employ, just trying to make a living, and frankly being forced off of the high street. So I'm sorry to say, Sophie, it is that bad.
Colette, reading your survey, I mean, it seems like, and hearing your answer as well, the factors you pointed, this is something that's been building over many months, as opposed to specifically induced because of the war and related costs going up in just the last few weeks?
It's been building up for a very long time. You know, we've been telling different kind of governments about this for the last 6 years and warning them of the catastrophe that was about to come. And what I mean by that is the collapse of employment in our sector and the collapse of apprentices. So this is, obviously, we're impacted by different areas. We use a huge amount of energy. You know, we're using hairdryers all the time. We're using all kinds of, resources that use electricity. So that just puts, to be honest, what that does is it just actually puts more pressure on. The pressure's already there. We're already seeing that, as we've already said, 1 in 2 salons will be considering closing in the next 12 months. And it's not just whether they consider, it's whether they're forced to close. I'm an employer, and we've got the business rates, we've got everything else, but it's almost like somebody being in their home and their bills going up that high. You just cannot sustain it. We cannot sustain it.
It feels to me like you're saying that the problem is the costs going up rather than people just not coming to the salon. You're still seeing people wanting to get their hair cut, wanting to get a shave or whatever it is. Is that still actually quite high?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, look, we're really fortunate. We have incredible relationships and, we're the only industry that has the ear of every constituent. Yes, we have still got the demand, but it doesn't matter because if cost outpaces demand, it becomes an unviable situation, and that's the problem, And with regards to kind of losses to the tax base, we're looking at £1 billion in just over a year. This is ridiculous. We're looking at 500 million in a year in taxes lost. And it's all because we have what's known as a two-tier tax trading field. So I'm the only employer out of 18. I pay VAT, national insurance, holiday pay, maternity pay, and then the 17 salons around me don't. So what that does is it means that I can't put my prices where they should be in order to meet the cost of living, national minimum wage increases, tax increases, electricity bills, business rates. So what it's doing is it's forcing us to actually close our businesses. I will have to close mine. Most people will. We don't want to be in this position. We've got a solution. We know we can turn this around if government listen to us. We know we can actually get growth into our local economies. We've got apprentices banging down our doors for jobs. So the frustrating thing is, if I may say, is that we've got the customers, we've got the trade, we've got the opportunity for growth. We're just being stopped from doing that. We've been stopped and stifled from growth by policy.
Colette, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I actually love getting my hair cut. Yeah, it's one of those few moments where you really zone out. You can't be on your phone, because otherwise it gets hair on it. It's a bit gross.
I love it too. Yeah. It's just that moment in the day. It's all good. Need to get mine done, actually.
It's interesting saying that the demand is still there, because, of course, it's one of the few shops going, because you can shop online. You have to go get your hair cut.
Yeah, well, we had that in lockdown, didn't we, with some disastrous results all round. So I think it's kind of the best advertisement for your hairdresser ever.
Now, it's the London Marathon this weekend, and there's a new and important partnership between them, the London Marathon organisers, and the NHS.
So 800,000 spectators are being encouraged to sign up to donate blood. They'll even get a special medal if they do so. And we're joined now by the Chief Executive of London Marathon Events, Hugh Brayshaw, great to have you with us. So just talk us through, what's the idea behind all this?
Yeah, look, the idea is we need more blood in this country. It's such an, it's important. It saves lives. We have about 800,000 donors at the moment, and that's the number of spectators that will be watching the London Marathon roadside on Sunday. And this is an initiative with Abbott, who are our healthcare partner, the NHS, to get people to register to give blood and to find out what blood type you are. There are 3 blood types there are a particular need for, which I believe is O negative, RO and B negative. And the more people, it's something I'm going to do for the first time today, is give blood. It's one of those things that you sort of think is a good thing, but what's going to get you over the hump to do it? And we hope that, this is called Blood, Sweat and Cheers. We hope that people will remember it and remember that all the good that they can do for somebody that they've never met by giving blood.
But I'm interested why it's so tied to the marathon. Is it a lot of advertising around the marathon, or do you actually expect spectators on the day to suddenly be like, do you know what? I'm going to stop watching for half an hour and go and give blood, and there's somewhere just behind me?
No, we expect them to register. So I am interested in giving blood, and Blood, Sweat and Cheers. I just think it's it's a nice campaign, tying in 800,000 people watching the event, the 800,000 donors. I think, we've got this partnership. The more that we can do for people's health, Abbott, as I say, is our healthcare partner, the NHS, the London Marathon is genuinely changes people's mental health, and it does it positively. 80% of runners 85% will feel better about their lives. Not the same. They will feel better about their lives by doing the London Marathon, and 80% of spectators. It's an incredibly positive day for this country. And actually giving blood is something else that you could do. And it's this hump. There's always things why we're too busy to do it. Register, then your name will be, you'll get contacted, and then hopefully that will help you to get over that hump of not giving blood and deciding that you are going to do it. I think it's a great initiative.
It does sound like a great initiative. It really does. And it's one of those things, like you say, that it's just so vitally important, and it's almost like you never realise how important it is until you're in the situation when you really need it as well.
Absolutely. As I say, I've not done it myself, and now this is going to mean I'm going to do it for the first time. I'm over 60. Why haven't I done it before? I don't have an excuse. This is just going to get me over that hump. I have a busy life, but heck, this is important.
Hugh, thanks so much. We really appreciate it. I totally agree with him. That is very important. Also, kudos to all those people running on.
Yeah, it's the most amazing.
Not to downplay the Blood, Sweat and Cheers thing.
Yeah, it's the most amazing thing as well.
Beth is doing it.
Yeah, Beth Rigby.
The second time.
Yeah, she's hardcore.
As he's saying he's been put to shame by not donating blood. Beth's putting us to shame.
Yeah, you're not fancying running the London Marathon then? No. No, me neither.
Dodgy
we'll cheer on
That's
and we'll donate
excuse.
for good causes. We'll do our bit in different ways as well.
Let's talk about an epic... Well, it's actually... Sorry. We've got epic highs and terrible lows last night.
You was thinking about Coventry, not Leicester,
yeah, no,
when you read that link, just to be clear.
Not rubbing it in for Leicester's fans. It's the split for the M69 derby, Coventry and Leicester. Coventry crowned champions of the Championship. They were confirmed that they were being promoted to the Premier League over the weekend. Confirmed champions last night. Leicester City, alas, relegated from the Championship to League One last night.
Yeah, and look, we all remember Leicester, of course, 10 years ago, making that legendary against-the-odds run to win the Premier League title. Now, just a decade later, they've been relegated from the Championship. They had to beat Hull to avoid dropping to League One, but they drew to all, sealed their fate, and just one season after dropping out the top flight. It just shows to me how, no matter how big the club is, if you drop down a league, it is not guaranteed, A, that you bounce back the next year, and B, that you actually do well in that league as well. I mean, Leicester, of course, being hit by points deduction as well, which doesn't help. But it's a sad day, I think.
Oh, it's absolutely tragic, as you said. What a... even as an Arsenal fan, by the way, they beat us to the title that year. You still loved it because it was one of the great stories. They got to the Champions League quarter-final the following year and now relegated. But Coventry, back to the Premier League for the first time in 25 years. And kudos to Frank Lampard, who only took over last November. They were 17th. Had an immediate impact. They got to the playoffs last season. Champions by quite some distance this season, and it'd be great to see Frank Lampard back, great to see Coventry back.
Couldn't score against Sheffield Wednesday, though. The mighty Owls. I've got to take these victories where I can, right?
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. We're out of time. We'll be back with all of the day's latest news.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Good morning, it is 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
The cost of the war in Iran. UK inflation jumps as Lufthansa cancels 20,000 flights, blaming the price of jet fuel.
It comes as the ceasefire between the US and Iran is extended, but the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked and peace talks are cancelled.
Pressure mounts on the Prime Minister, who will face another day of questions on the Peter Mandelson vetting process.
Later in the programme, we're going to be talking to the former boss of NATO, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, about whether he thinks the relationship between Trump and Europe will survive.
And a new film about Michael Jackson's rise to stardom draws widespread criticism for not telling the full story.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to the programme. We're seeing evidence of the economic impact of the war in the Middle East. Inflation has risen to 3.3%, and there's real impact in the airline industry too, with Lufthansa announcing it's cutting 20,000 short-haul flights between May and October.
Well, it blamed the cost of jet fuel, which it says has more than doubled, as well as labour disputes within its workforce. Our business and economics correspondent Paul Calso is here. Let's start on wider inflation, shall we? Because I guess this is the first time we're starting to see the impact of the war feed through.
Yeah, these are the official figures, M&S figures for March. Conflict began on the 28th of February, so it's a full month of data. Consumer price inflation, the main measure we use, up 3.3% from 3%. That's in line with expectations, but these, of course, are post-war expectations, not the expectations we were talking about in February, and everyone was expecting that inflation would be dipping down. See that red line on the chart there? That's the Bank of England's 2% target. Everyone, including the bank, was expecting it to be reaching that about now, but you can see that little uptick on the right of the screen there. That is the first step upwards in these March numbers, driven largely, almost exclusively by fuel prices. Anyone who's filled up a car with diesel or petrol knows this already. Fuel prices up nearly 5%. Transport costs, as the ONS break them out in here, driving up that. And they're insidious, not just because they affect our costs when we fill up a car, but they seep into every corner of the economy, practically every material good in the British economy. Anything you buy, anything you want to sell, all raw materials come by road, and haulage costs have gone through the roof. I've been out and about in the last few days. I was talking to down in Kent at a big fruit and vegetable importer-exporter. They're a grower, but at the moment they're mainly bringing goods up from southern Europe to ensure we've got salad vegetables out of season, and they've seen an enormous impact on their costs. We can hear what they had to say.
We've got lorries coming in from Spain, Morocco, the rest of Europe, and it's had a huge impact, around £1,000 per lorry coming to the UK. We have 6, 7 to 10 lorries a day, so it could be £30,000, £40,000 a week of costs for our business.
And that is added straight on, and that's not a cost you can dodge, you can't negotiate?
No, nothing. You cannot negotiate that. But it's not only the cost of importing into the UK, it's the freight costs of delivering it to our customers once it reaches here. That's also gone up 20 to 25%.
We've had a response from the Chancellor of the Exchequer. It's in line a little bit with what we heard from Pat McFadden a little earlier. A familiar phrase, this. Rachel Reeves has said, this is not our war, but it is pushing up bills for families and businesses. That's why it's my #1 priority to keep costs down. Our economic plan is the right one and has put us in a stronger position to support families in the face of this new crisis. She does go on to talk about some of the specific measures, cutting energy bills for consumers and freezing rail fares. All those measures were intended to help people start to feel they have more money in their pockets, but the war has changed all of that. Not this government's war, but it is this government's problem.
Tell us a bit about this Lufthansa news, because 20,000 flights, it's headline-grabbing for sure. What are the details?
Yeah, it certainly is, and people will think that's that it's really significant. It's actually, it's not as enormous as it sounds, but it is a lot of flights. 20,000 flights, which they are cutting. Optimising is the word they've used. They're taking out the flights that essentially are not profitable, and they're very clear about why. They say it will save them 40,000 tonnes of jet fuel. So this is about the cost of jet fuel, and they say in their statement, unusual frankness from a big corporation, the price has doubled. So we join the dots. It's no longer profitable. They're looking to cut the costs. Not supply as yet. They say they have supplies of jet fuel for now. For the coming weeks, but that doesn't make it feel like that it's entirely secure. They're going to optimise, they say, their summer schedules. That's what they'll want to protect. And these are short-haul routes, largely in mainland Europe. But Lufthansa, an enormous airline, one that many people here will have booked summer flights on, and transatlantic flights as well. And it just again highlights the fact that fuel is in the front line of the impact from this war. And jet fuel, supplies being where the greatest concern is about actual supply as opposed to just cost.
And I guess the worry is that this is just the start with the Lufthansa news, but also with the inflation figures. And what's going on in the Middle East now? They're not even talking at the minute. It's kind of what's to come is, I guess, the fear.
Absolutely, and I've just thought the Strait of Hormuz, it's like someone's put their heel on a hose pipe.
Yeah.
And the longer that oil isn't flowing, and it's not going to be immediate, even if it were to be lifted tomorrow, the greater the impact will be. And you're right, it feels like the second shoe to drop, fuel prices, we've had the second one, is energy prices. Right now, certainly domestic use, households are protected from the energy price shock, gas and electricity prices, by the price cap. But there's no cap for businesses who are already facing 30, 40, 50, 60% increases in their energy costs. And that will start to be felt. Of course, we've got the price cap review later this year. Again, it's all about when this will end, because the longer it goes on, the more certain it is to hit us all in the pocket.
Paul, great stuff. Thanks so much. Much appreciated. Do get in touch with us, by the way, if you're feeling the pinch from rising costs and inflation. We'll be talking about it. Email us, please, mornings@sky.uk. That is our email address, isn't it?
That's very good. It is, yeah. Mornings@sky.uk.
You just wrote it down for me.
Yeah, we know it now. It's on the screens as well. Hopefully you know it as well. Myself. Yeah, exactly. Got to get the right one. Don't want people.
Well, there's also cheat sheet at sky.uk.
Yeah, you can also email cheat sheet at sky.uk.
If you want to email the podcast, then
whatever way. Also this morning, we are going to be talking to the former NATO Secretary-General as well about the war. That interview coming up after 9 a.m. Definitely worth sticking around for that one.
Well, the increased pressure on costs here in the UK, of course, is impacting events in the Middle East. Earlier, Donald Trump announced a ceasefire between the US and Iran as being extended just hours before it was due to expire.
There was a bit of a confusing picture in Washington last night. Vice President J.D. Vance had been due to travel to Pakistan for peace talks with the Iranians. But late last night, the White House confirmed the trip was off, at least for the time being. As you'd expect, there have been some posts from President Trump overnight. He said Iran doesn't want the Strait of Hormuz closed. They want it open so they can make $500 million a day, which is therefore what they are losing if it is closed. They only say they want it closed because I have it totally blocked, closed. So they merely want to save face. People approached me 4 days ago saying, "Sir, Iran wants to open up the strait immediately. But if we do that, there can never be a deal with Iran unless we blow up the rest of their country, their leaders included." President Donald J. Trump. Let's get to Cordy Lynch, who's in Pakistan for us. Cordy, you were waiting for J.D. Vance's arrival. Not happening in the next 12 hours at least. Is there expectation it will happen in the next day or so?
Look, I think, Wolf, there is a tiny window of possibility that remains open. I think the hope that still remains in the air is that the ceasefire was extended, and critically, there's no deadline attached to it, unlike the previous ceasefire, which was in place for 2 weeks. And I think that signals that America and Iran are both still committed to trying to bring this war to a close. They both want it, arguably both to different degrees. Donald Trump knows this is a hugely unpopular war at home. He also knows the massively damaging economic impact globally, but also, of course, at home, and those soaring gas prices. What I would say here in Islamabad is the security procedures, cordons, remain in place. And so that suggests that they still have the groundwork in place to host some kind of talks if they indeed do happen in person. But an absolutely central sticking point to all of this is the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has made clear that if US don't end the blockade of Iranian ports, they're not going to come back to the table to talk and make any kind of wider, more meaningful agreement. So far, publicly, Donald Trump is signalling he's not willing or ready to do that. Of course, separate to all of that is the issue of enriched uranium, what Iran is willing to commit to on that front. That's a lot more complex, arguably part of a much broader discussion that may be kicked into the long grass now. I think the best thing that people can hope for is that the Strait of Hormuz is reopened. They've got some sort of stability that returns. But I think what we've seen play out in all of this is Donald Trump enacting diplomacy online through Truth Social, and that kind of sidebar to what's happening behind closed doors here in Islamabad between Washington and Tehran has the potential to really derail any progress. Iran says that they had committed to a 10-point plan with America, that they were ready to reach agreement But then came public statements. They believe that America was violating the ceasefire. Washington accuses Tehran of doing the same, it must be said. But I think the real kind of risk in all of this is Donald Trump and what he says alongside all the kind of practical diplomatic negotiations. Could we see a shift in the next few hours? It is still possible. Hope is fading, but it's not entirely extinguished.
Cordy, thanks so much. By the way, off the back of that cancellation, or at least expectation of that cancellation, we did see oil prices rise again yesterday. They're now off a little bit today, but we're at 98 now on Brent crude. So the spread for the last week has been sort of 90 to 100. So we're, back up at the higher end of that range.
Let's talk politics now, shall we? Keir Starmer's going to face another round of questions about the Peter Mandelson vetting scandal today after a hugely damaging day of evidence from the former chief of the Foreign Office.
Well, yesterday, Sir Ollie Robbins described an atmosphere of pressure in the vetting process of Peter Mandelson and said that Number 10 had taken a dismissive approach to security checks. Let's listen to some of that evidence, which was fairly extraordinary.
The handover briefing I was getting as I arrived at post was what I felt was a generally dismissive attitude to his vetting clearance. The focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. A position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson. I think throughout January, honestly, my office, the Foreign Secretary's office, were under constant pressure. There was an atmosphere of constant chasing. When will this?
Daily phone calls.
I couldn't say for certain daily, but I mean certainly very frequent, from private office to private office. Has this been delivered yet? Never any interest, as far as I recall, in whether, but only an interest in when.
Obviously, that was started at 9 a.m. yesterday. We were watching it live. I was glued as we came off air to all of his comments. I wondered whether there'd be a sudden sort of set of announcements, particularly from backbench MPs, possibly from more senior people than that on the Labour side. It didn't really come.
No, not really. I still don't think that this takes away from how dangerous an episode this is for the Prime Minister. But you're right, I've been kind of describing it as being more of a flat feeling from MPs than feeling kind of fizzing with anger. I did think it was very interesting, Ed Miliband's comments, even before the committee hearing yesterday to you, saying that he would never have appointed Mandelson. You then had Yvette Cooper yesterday talking about these reports that Matthew Doyle, another chief in Number 10, a communications chief, was positioned for a job in the Foreign Office as well, which is another problematic thing for Labour MPs. Yvette Cooper apparently saying that those reports were extremely concerning. So you've certainly had MPs and some ministers kind of, in a very muted way, starting to express their dissatisfaction, at least wanting to distance themselves from the potential reputational damage, or say potential reputational damage, the damage it's already had on the Prime Minister.
We've spoken so much about Mandelson. You mentioned then Matthew Doyle, which is one of the, I guess, new things that we learned yesterday. And I did ask Pat McFadden about it, who was the government minister on the round this morning. Let's just listen to what he said.
It's the first I'd heard of it yesterday. I don't know what conversations took place between Number 10 and the Foreign Office about that, but it didn't come to anything, and I don't think Matthew had the experience to become an ambassador. So I don't know what, if he was about to leave Number 10, what conversations were taking place.
I mean, you know you're doing the interview today. You must have asked them. Did it happen?
Well, I don't know.
The implication is that it was Keir Starmer, right? That he was like, right, let's get this guy a nice posting.
Look,
Did that happen?
It's not unusual if someone's leaving to say, what do you want to do next? Quite what he was asked what he wanted to do next, I don't know.
I'm really sorry. Because normally I'm quite forgiving when people say, I don't know. In this situation, when it was this time, yesterday morning, you must have asked the question. Or if you didn't ask the question, it's because you wanted to come in here and say, I'm really sorry, I don't know. I don't accept that.
No, I always tried to prepare, but...
So what did you do? Did you ask Number 10 what happened?
The important point for me is...
No, sorry, this is an important point for me. Did you ask number 10 what happened?
So I'm told no appointment was made.
But
That's
did you
the right
ask
decision.
number 10? We know no appointment was made. Did you ask number 10 if it is true that Keir Starmer asked for an ambassadorship from Matthew Doyle? Did you ask the question?
I don't think he would have been right for such a post. I think it's right that no appointment was made.
Did you ask the question?
I don't know what conversations were held with Matthew.
Did you ask the question?
What question?
Did you ask number 10 if it's true Keir Starmer asked for an ambassadorship for Matthew Doyle? Did you ask that question?
I don't think Keir Starmer would have asked for this. I don't know what conversation.
Did you ask the question? It's a really simple... You know the answer to that question. Did you ask the question?
I have not asked if Keir Starmer asked this.
OK. And why did you not ask that? Because you wanted to come on here and say you didn't know anything about it?
No, because I don't think the Prime Minister would be in the position of picking up a phone on a personnel matter like that.
I think for the Prime Minister, this revelation yesterday was probably one of the more problematic things. We talked a lot, you talked for kind of 2.5 hours about the process, the complexities of it. And I think you said this to Pat McFadden, the impression that Mandelson may not have been the only one, that it adds to this criticism that some have already put on Prime Minister in Downing Street, that they are looking for jobs for their friends. In what Ollie Robbins said, are jobs that should be taken up by very senior, experienced civil servants who have been working for the institution for many years. That's what Labour MPs are really disappointed by, because it maybe just wasn't Mandelson.
Lucy, great stuff as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're joined now by somebody who, if you weren't under a rock yesterday, will have been all over your TV screens, all over your digital feeds as well. The chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Dame Emily Thornberry, who joins us now. I just want to ask you a very broad brush question to start. What did you make of Ollie Robbins's evidence yesterday?
We didn't really know what to make of it, you know, in advance, because he'd been in front of us before. And to be honest, he'd just given us a whole lot of nonsense. You know, he really had given us the runaround. We had been mandarined, you know, and his boss came in too. And the two of them, between them, I mean, honestly, it was just, we'd ask them a question and they were just like, so we found it really turgid. So I wasn't sure what to expect. And I said that at the beginning. I said, you know, there is an oath which is tell the whole truth, not just the truth. And we would like the whole truth. And actually, I think in a way, I mean, there still were some reservations, but I think he was much more open than he had been, and there was a lot to say.
Can I ask a sort of rather boring technical question to get into it as well, which is, in your assessment, having heard all the sides of this, do you think Peter Mandelson actually failed vetting, or was it only advice that he might not be passed? I mean, because oddly, for the last 6 days, maybe the government could have avoided all of this if they'd addressed the question differently.
I think that what happens is that you get the vetting, and then that is then given to the Foreign Office, and the Foreign Office then make the actual decision. But the organisation doing the vetting said that, I can't remember exactly the words, but it was something like that Mandelson was a person of deep concern, and that they recommended that he didn't pass vetting. So it was then up to the Foreign Office to decide whether they go with that or not. And I think what was one of the things which worried me about Ollie Robbins's evidence was that he didn't seem to have clocked that. He seemed to think that it was a borderline case, but I think that the recommendation from vetting was much stronger than that.
If you've got the two different arguments here, right? You've got Ollie Robbins who says, I was put under pressure to do this. The decision had been made already. They didn't even think that vetting needed to happen, and I followed the process. Then you've got Keir Starmer saying, I'm absolutely furious because I wasn't told about this and it was concealed from me. Who's right?
So I thought about this quite a lot, and I think that there's most definitely fault on both sides. I think that Ollie Robbins should have told the Prime Minister, or should have told somebody, there has been problems, but I've overridden it, and so long as he doesn't do X, Y and Z, he'll be all right, which is kind of where we got to with him. And I think that, on the other hand, it was appalling to have put pressure, not just on him, but on Philip Barton beforehand, you know, and have put pressure on him, got the thing announced, told the King, told the President of the United States, written, offering him the letter before he'd even been vetted. That was completely wrong, and that puts ridiculous pressure on the Foreign Office. And you know, all of those things were not said subject to vetting, so giving the impression it's kind of like a done deal. So I think there's a fault on that side. Now, then the question is this the Prime Minister's fault? And it is my genuine view that the Prime Minister, and this is a fault on his part, does delegate. And I think that, you know, the person in charge of his office has already resigned for pushing the issue of Peter Mandelson too far. He was like, you know, Morgan McSweeney was like a protege of Peter Mandelson's. Peter Mandelson used to be on the phone to him, be in Number 10 all the time, giving him advice, etc. And I think that he said to the Prime Minister, look, don't worry about that, I can sort this out. And was railroading it through, you know, treading on process. And from what I know of the Prime Minister, that wouldn't have been the way the Prime Minister would have done it. But it's also, from what I know of the Prime Minister, for him to can just imagine him saying, oh, yeah, OK, no, if you can deal with that, that'd be great, because I've got lots of other things I want to do.
Just to push on the Ollie Robbins side of things first. Yeah. You said extraordinary pressure on the Foreign Office to approve this based on what you outlined. There's an added detail to that I don't quite get, that he said a couple of times, which is to say once the train had left the station, to try and unwind the appointment would have really damaged our relationship with the US, etc., etc. It couldn't possibly have been damaged more than it has been a year later. And I don't see why that's an excuse to say it would be damaging, therefore I'm not going to do the right thing, I'm not going to do what should be done here. Instead, all you've done is, you know, delayed the problem and allowed it to grow even bigger. I mean, yes, there was pressure, but does that excuse, if he judged the decision to say, well, we shouldn't give the permission, does it excuse making it that particular decision?
Imagine what would have happened if, you know, they had done all these things. They'd basically announced he was going to get the job. The King has said yes. The President of the United States has said yes.
But look at what has happened.
No, listen, no, hang on. I agree with you. But, you know, so imagine what would have happened if they had done all of that and then Ollie Robbins had said, actually, do you know what? He's a risk. We don't agree to it. All hell would have let loose. Now, I think that would have been the right thing to do. I agree with you. But, you know, if you're a civil servant, your job as a civil servant, in a way, is to facilitate what it is that politicians want you to do. So I think there was a bit of that. And when I said I didn't think that he gave his full account, I think although he said he was under a huge amount of pressure, his evidence was that that pressure didn't affect his decision. But I'm not sure about that. I mean, we didn't hear evidence of that. But, I mean, looking at it, I think, you know, he thought, right, OK, let's see what we can do in order to try to make the best of this difficult situation. I think that we would have protected ourselves if it hadn't have happened. But, you know, it should never have been announced, you know, in December under the previous Permanent Undersecretary. And you know, I know that he was put under a huge amount of pressure.
You talk about Philip Barton here.
Yeah.
Are you worried about maybe because he left, didn't he?
He left 8 months early.
Do you think that's a bit suspicious, I guess? Like,
I don't know why. I mean, I've heard of some of the pressure that he was put under. You know, I've heard of a direct phone call from Morgan McSweeney to Philip Barton, where Morgan McSweeney swore at him and told him to get on with it. You know, so that is a huge amount of pressure. And I mean, I know that Morgan McSweeney denies it, but you know, that's what we've heard.
It feels a coincidence that he then left. 2 weeks later, the new guy rams through this appointment despite the vetting advice. Coincidence, I think, is a fair term.
I also think that it would be much easier if Ollie Robbins had made notes, had made notes of, you know, this is the conversation I've had, you know, we've had all these phone calls, you know, make a note of all the phone calls from Number 10. You know, was it right that they were having daily phone calls? Where is the evidence of that? The evidence of, can you give another mate of mine a job? Matthew Doyle. Where's the note on that? I mean, this is what civil servants do. Civil servants do make a note when they make themselves a cup of tea. I mean, they do make notes, and yet with Ollie Robbins, there aren't any notes. I'm not saying I'm not sympathetic. I'm not saying that he's been through a very difficult time, but if you were to ask me, do I think that in all the circumstances it was right for him to lose his job? I think actually it was. But, you know, I mean, he should never have been put into that position.
How about Keir Starmer? Should he keep his job?
I think that Keir is going to keep his job, and I think it's the right thing to do. We've got a war going on. And, you know, I think that this is not the time to even be thinking about this.
Emily Thornberry.
I've just got one question from the viewer. I'm just going to squeeze in. Sorry. This is from Catherine, who was very excited, by the way, that you were coming on. She's delighted that we've got you on Mornings today. She said, kindly ask Emily if she will be requiring the Prime Minister to appear before herself and the committee anytime soon, so she can examine more closely Starmer's part in the vetting.
I think usually the Prime Minister appears before the liaison committee. And in any event, I mean, lots of people have been asking me, who are you calling next? And what I want to say is they will be hearing from me directly, not through the media.
What about Tim Barrow, though? What about the previous Permanent Secretary?
As I said, you know, any of the witnesses that we want, I think it's a courteous thing to do is to ask them directly myself rather than do it through you guys. Sorry.
Fair enough. There you go, Catherine.
It was...
Partially answered a question.
Yeah, it was very, very interesting hearing yesterday. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Emily.
Now, if you feel hay feverish at the moment and if it's affecting you more this year than past years, you're not imagining things.
Yeah, health researchers are suggesting higher temperatures from climate change means symptoms today last 2 weeks longer than they did in the 90s. This is a thing, I think.
I'm very fortunate. I'm not a hay fever sufferer, so I can't speak to this this experience. But yeah,
Emily says it's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. I've actually developed asthma. I mean, I started off with hay fever, and now, just recently, at my great age, I've now developed asthma, and it's all triggered by the same sort of stuff.
Yeah, I've only just recently started suffering from hay fever as well. I love it. We bring you in to talk about, you know, the kind of big political stories, and you're also here for the hay fever.
It's a serious matter when you've got it. It's a serious matter.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Dame Emily Thornberry there. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Dale Vince. This quote jumped out to us. That's why we booked him. He said, "Let's keep gas boilers and buy bombs we need instead." You might not have expected that from his mouth. We'll be speaking to him about it next.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming. It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Welcome back. We've talked a lot on the programme about how the Iran war could impact energy bills. The government's announced measures in response to the crisis, including plans to de-link gas and electricity prices. But is it going far enough? We can speak now to the founder of the energy company Ecotricity, Dale Vince, who's also a Labour donor. Dale, great to have you with us again. Thanks for joining us. This comment you made over the weekend has got a lot of attention. You were talking about the fact that the government should stop spending £2.7 billion per year on heat pumps. And you said, instead, let's keep the gas boilers we have and buy the bombs we need. Expand on that for us a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a near £3 billion fund for heat pumps. It gives about £8,000 to families that are relatively well off because they can afford to top that up with the other £10,000 more or less that you need to buy a heat pump, which will pretty much typically put your energy bills up. They don't bring bills down. So it's a very odd kind of subsidy. It's for the well-off, and it's not going to bring bills down. It won't move the dial on our climate ambitions, but it is at the same time a big sum of money. And last week I heard that we'd just given a few more £1 billion to Ukraine to fight Russia, and at the same time our MOD is short of a few £1 billion. And it occurred to me, we could repurpose this heat pump fund and actually perhaps put it to better use.
And you think that should be on defence spending?
Exactly, yeah, because we've got a shortfall there, and we've got a pot of money that's really not going to do any good, even if and when it gets spent.
It clearly is one part of the government's broader energy plans. Another part, obviously, that has been getting some coverage of late is this announcement yesterday to try and break the cycle between the raw commodity price, gas price, and the electricity price that people get at home. What do you think about that? Is that just a little bit of hyperbole, or is it really a viable thing to do?
Well, we've been campaigning for this since 2022, the first energy crisis of this decade. And as an energy company, we could see that the price of gas was going through the roof. It went to 10 times its normal price at times. But quite exceptionally, it took the price of all other forms of electricity with it because we have this thing called the link. So the price of our own wind and sun became the same as the globally inflated price of gas. And in 2023, it added £43 billion to our nation's energy bill. So it's vital that we tackle this thing. What the government announced yesterday is probably the least they could do and still claim to be tackling this issue. Almost theatre rather than actual action, because they've introduced a voluntary long-term contract for about 30% of the generation in our country. They hope that it might knock gas away from setting prices by 10% in 5 years' time. I mean, it's nowhere near good enough. In 2023, the link added 1.5 percentage points to inflation and 1% to Bank of England lending rates. To put 1 million people in poverty, we have to be far more bold than this, and we have to properly break the link. What the government did yesterday, the BBC described as weakening the link. A lot of people called it that. It barely goes that far, in my opinion.
I mean, it's interesting because clearly to break the link between gas and electricity, one way of doing it is to try and prevent things that aren't gas-powered, like wind energy, for example, from fluctuating when gas prices fluctuate. But the critics of trying to do that would say that the price we pay for wind energy at the moment is relatively high. It's obviously subsidised to get these very expensive wind farms built in the first place, and that over time, a very long period of time, we hope that the marginal cost of wind energy will come down. And trying to break the link in the short term, another way of framing that is to sort of guarantee what are quite high prices for wind energy that exist at the moment. Is there accuracy in that argument as well?
That sounds really quite complex. Every new form of green generation we build has something called a CFD, a contract for difference, and that fixes the price long term. And that's the price the generator gets, whatever the market does. So the real target of action here needs to be what's known as legacy green generation, wind, sun, nuclear, that kind of stuff. And the government have at least picked on the right target, but to make it a voluntary long-term contract, in effect, to give them a CFD that we give to new green generation, it's the right idea, but it shouldn't be voluntary. It should be mandatory. And we shouldn't let North Sea oil and gas go unnoticed in all this. We can put a long-term contract, a CFD, on our own North Sea oil and gas so that when global markets go crazy, we don't have to pay that price for our own oil and gas. And that's what the government should have done. But there are other ways to break the link as well, technical, but simple ways to break the link. Every day there's an auction. Gas generators bid a certain price to be on the grid. It's usually the highest price. And then everybody else in the auction that's bid below them gets paid the gas price. We can just change that system so that you get what you bid rather than get what gas bids. And that's the easiest, most thorough way to break the link.
You mentioned North Sea oil and gas there. What's your view on whether we should be trying to increase or maximise the volume of supply we get from the North Sea, and then what we should be doing with it?
Well, I think we should use what we have. And a long-term contract for North Sea oil and gas would help us to maximize extraction because it would prevent there being a cliff edge event where prices collapse and operators in the North Sea walk away because their wells become economic. That's a slightly different issue. But the people that argue that if we drill more oil and gas in the North Sea, we can increase our energy security, they seem unaware that almost 100% of the oil we make in the North Sea is exported. It doesn't even land here. And the people that argue it can help give us price protection are completely unaware that the global market sets the price of our own North Sea oil and gas. It doesn't matter how much we produce there, we'll pay the global price. So it can't protect us on price and it can't protect us on energy security. Apart from that, of course, it'll help us break our climate targets, and we shouldn't be doing it for that reason. But there is no single reason for us to drill more oil and gas in the North Sea.
So you reject it, that it would boost tax revenues and protect jobs?
That's not the record of the North Sea right now. If you look at the amount of tax coming out of the North Sea, and the example often cited is Rosebank, and that requires a £3 billion public subsidy to a Norwegian energy company to build Rosebank. And they've said every drop of oil they make there, they'll export. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I don't believe there would be a great rush of tax revenue. It'd probably take 3 to 5 years to get anything new out of the North Sea. What we've got left is about 10% of what we ever had. You know, we've got about 10 years left in the North Sea. It's time that we spent our time and our money on green energy, which of course we are doing. But this is a distraction caused by the energy crisis. It's quite funny in the teeth of a global fossil fuel crisis for people to say we need more fossil fuels. That's pouring oil on the fire.
Of course, significant subsidies for a lot of those green energies that you reference as well. Dale Vince, we're out of time. Thanks for joining us.
Fossil fuel subsidies are bigger.
Cumulatively. Dale, thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Donald Trump has extended the ceasefire between the US and Iran, but there's another ceasefire hanging in the balance between Israel and Lebanon. Families in the war zone are burying their dead after weeks of fighting, and some is seeing it's fueling anger and vengeance.
Well, our international correspondent, Diana Magbay, has been looking into it. She sent this report.
The lamenting and the emotional anguish around the coffins at a Hezbollah funeral is as much an expression of personal grief as it is of collective suffering, of the rituals in Shia Islam around martyrdom and resistance. We were invited by Hezbollah to film all this, to get their message out to the power brokers in Beirut and especially to Israel, that they are proud to die in battle and that their fight goes on.
The final goodbye for 8 people, some civilians, some fighters, we don't know how many. They weren't able to extract the bodies until now, until this ceasefire. Now there's only chance to say goodbye.
The habitual chants, death to Israel, death to America, around coffins draped in the yellow flag of Hezbollah. Caressed by mothers and widows and sisters, with Boy Scouts standing by, holding the banners of Hezbollah's ultimate sponsors, the last 2 Ayatollahs, and a long line of leaders of Iran's axis of resistance.
What do you say to those Lebanese people who are angry that Hezbollah brought this war on Lebanon by launching 6 rockets to avenge the Ayatollah?
Those Lebanese who complained that the 6 rockets inconvenienced them were filling the nightclubs and bars in various places and seaside venues and tourist spots across Lebanon. The ones who truly paid the price were the people of the land, who refused to let Israel drive them from their homes with the complicity of the Lebanese state.
We headed inland from the coastal road, as far south as you can get before a Lebanese army checkpoint prevents you from entering Israeli-occupied territory. We passed mile after mile of wrecked villages, scarred from heavy shelling and repeated Israeli airstrikes. Hard to tell which war did what to these homes. The last one, which started on October the 8th, 2023, the 15 months of supposed ceasefire in between, or this one, much shorter so far, but devastating. In the village of Mansouri, the rubble from an airstrike which killed 8 people who'd gone back to check on their homes after Donald Trump's ceasefire with Iran, thinking that that deal applied to them too.
My father is the one who just died here. So now that I have to revenge for him, because I will never leave his blood to go away just like that.
What does that mean, revenge for you?
Revenge for me, that means I will do whatever I can do to revenge for my father.
That means fight Israel? Is that what you mean?
Sure, and we will never have peace with them.
There is this constant buzz of Israeli drones overhead. And when you talk to people here in the south, they say there can be no peace with Israel. They look at the devastation of their villages. They talk about the destruction in Gaza, the carving up of the West Bank into Israeli settlements. And they say this is not about security for Israel. This is about expanding their territory and settling more and more land. So for the men in Beirut in their suits to negotiate with Israel on behalf of the people who have lost everything, that just doesn't square up for them. In the ancient coastal city of Tyre, there are temporary cemeteries, freshly dug for bodies that could not be buried where they should have been, separated even in death by war from their homes and final resting places. Mohammed Saeed had come to visit his brother's grave.
Tell her that we're a people who really love life. We're a people who love life. The problem is the government has forsaken us. There isn't a house in the whole of South Lebanon that doesn't have a martyr or 2 or 3.
This land is soaked in Lebanese blood. Each fallen son or daughter of its soil, fuel for further vengeance. Diana Magnay, Sky News, in Tyre, Lebanon.
Diana Magnay there for us, and of course, much more to come from the region throughout the morning.
We've been looking today at a new film that is proving to be pretty controversial. It's about Michael Jackson's rise to fame. It's out in cinemas today, and we're going to discuss why it's already drawn some widespread criticism. That's coming up next.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok. We've been undercover inside Asia's huge network of scam centres.
This compound is, without a doubt, the worst. It is essentially hell on earth.
We cover a vast, varied and dynamic region that's shaping the rest of the world.
Okay, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch, wait. Right, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away.
Okay, but
listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
that is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war, and all around us was destruction and the sound of battle. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Hello again. In the run-up to the Welsh Senedd elections, we're going to be talking to senior representatives of all the big political parties there. And this morning, it is the turn of the Welsh Conservative. So I'm very pleased to say the party's leader, Darren Miller, joins us now live. Good to have you with us. I've been asking the same first question to everyone. If you were made, the leader there, if you got the majority, what's your number one, day one priority?
Declaring a health emergency, because the NHS in Wales is simply not working, unfortunately, Sophie, for far too many people. People wait too long for ambulances, too long in our emergency departments, and too long for tests and treatments. And unfortunately, people are coming to harm as a result. So we need to declare a health emergency. We need to pull that ripcord. We need to surge the number of beds in our hospitals so that we can get on top of this situation and stop all of those preventable deaths which the Royal College of Emergency Medicine and others are warning are happening as a result of the situation.
So that's the pitch. I guess the issue you have is that it looks vanishingly unlikely to happen. Polling shows that you guys are in fourth place, projecting a handful of seats, maybe up to 7. Are you struggling for relevance in Wales?
Well, polls are all over the place, actually. And, of course, we've got a brand new election system here in Wales that people are very unfamiliar with and which will throw up some very unpredictable results. So we're fighting for every single vote. And what's really interesting is that when you can have those conversations on the doorstep with people, you can tell them that and explain to them that, Labour's been in power for 27 years, propped up by Plaid Cymru and the Liberal Democrats. So those are parties that don't offer any change. And then you talk about the risks of a reform government that promises the earth as a party and yet has failed to deliver in councils like Kent. They come round to the prospect of voting for some realistic change with people who are not interested in being celebrities, but people who want to roll their sleeves up and get on with the job, the hard job of government and running a country.
You say that the polls have been all over the place. Can you point me to a recent poll that was a good one for the Welsh Conservatives?
Well, look, as I said to you, these elections are very unpredictable. There are a range of seats which have been predicted for the Welsh Conservatives just in recent months, from the teens in terms of seats right down to smaller numbers. But those polls make me and my teams work harder across the country, and I'm very proud of the work that they're doing to engage with people as we get closer to these elections. We've knocked on tens of thousands of doors, and having those conversations matters.
What would be a good night for you guys? What's the aim? In the teens for seats? Is that the aim?
Shall I tell you what will be a good night for the people of Wales? Is seeing the back of this clapped-out Labour government which has failed this country for 27 years. We've got the worst educational outcomes, the worst NHS and the lowest pay packets in Britain, Sophie. We desperately need change. That's what we need, and we need some hope and optimism. We need to fire up this Welsh economy. That's why we've got a tax-cutting agenda, a penny off income tax, scrapped stamp duty. All of that will help people with the cost of living, get our housing market moving and get some money into people's pockets.
You could say what would be a good night for the Welsh people, but I asked what would be a good night for the Welsh Conservatives. What are you aiming for?
A good night for the Welsh Conservatives will be to have as many Welsh Conservatives elected to that Senedd as possible so that we can have a big impact in the next Senedd, which is going to be a very, very different beast. No single party is predicted to get an overall majority. So the more Welsh Conservatives there are in that Senedd, the more people there will be fighting for tax cuts, fighting for a better NHS, fighting for better outcomes for young people, and fighting for people to get the keys to their own front door through our stamp duty policy.
Can I just finally ask you about reform? Because you've had to kick out some people for potential defections, James Evans, for example, earlier this year. How much of an issue is that for you?
Well, look, Reform tries to masquerade as a Conservative party when in reality it isn't. It's a populist party. It'll say anything in order to get votes. It's not a values-driven party like the Conservative Party that believes in freedom of choice, personal responsibility, low taxes, lower welfare spending, and helping people to realise those ambitions of owning their own home and setting up their own business. So, when people weigh up these things more carefully as we get closer to the elections, and of course it's 2 weeks away now, people are still weighing up these things. I think that people will make the credible choice, and that is to vote for the Welsh Conservatives over Reform.
OK, thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme today.
Thank you.
Now, a new film about Michael Jackson opens in cinemas today, and it's already got a lot of people talking.
Yeah, not necessarily for the right reasons, though. The movie follows the singer's extraordinary rise to stardom, but it doesn't make any reference to allegations that he sexually abused children, a scandal which dominated the final years of his life.
A warning: this report from Katie Spencer contains flash photography.
17 years after his death, a new Michael Jackson movie is coming out. And if forecasters have got it right, it could gross $1 billion. Because in spite of allegations of child sexual abuse, in the last decade, Jackson's global popularity has not waned. From jukebox musicals to Spotify streams, when the singer died, he was reportedly hundreds of millions in debt. Today, his estate is valued at $2 billion.
Just have all these songs in my head.
Jafar Jackson, Michael's nephew, has earned quite a bit of praise for his performance in the new film, with the family executors heavily involved behind the scenes. It is a story emphasising Jackson's loneliness, childhood trauma and talent, skirting around the controversy by stopping at the height of his fame.
The film's original third act reportedly had included some abuse allegations, but that section had to be cut and reshot when lawyers pointed out that past legal settlements prevented all parties from talking about what did or didn't go on. With such a narrow lens on Jackson's life, there are plenty of people who hate the idea that the film will undoubtedly revive and reshape his public image.
Not least the woman who commissioned the Leaving Neverland documentary about these two men, Wade Robson and James Safechuck, detailing their alleged childhood sexual abuse by Jackson and the psychological aftermath. Former Channel 4 boss Dorothy Byrne says Hollywood should be ashamed.
It's wrong to even listen to his music, never mind go and see a film, because people are making money out of this. And that's what you have to say to yourself. You wouldn't go and see a film about Jimmy Savile that was all about him running marathons. You shouldn't go and see a film about Michael Jackson, the singer, because he's not just Michael Jackson, the singer. This film is not telling you the truth about him.
Jackson's posthumous earnings have relied on dismissing the allegations of child sex abuse, which the singer denied in life and which his executors have contested since. While we might live in the age of cancel culture, when it comes to Jackson, because his music is so beloved, is the truth that a lot of people just don't want to hear it, mentally splitting the music from the person because it's intertwined with our formative years.
Michael Jackson is the biggest star of the universe and always has been and always will be. If you start getting rid of music that's made by artists who have behaved horribly, then you're getting rid of everybody from James Brown to Wagner. Most people are sophisticated and they know if they go to see a movie, they might go, oh, this is not quite right, or there's more to the story, even though I enjoyed the movie. And then they can find out by researching this.
It is a lot harder, impossible, some might argue, to unlike music you've grown up singing along to. But when it's an artist whose life was so mired in controversy, critics argue it's wrong to buy a ticket to a movie which paints him as a character deserving of our sympathy, but stops short of taking in the alleged trauma Jackson inflicted on others. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Now, we've all heard of firefighters being called to rescue a car, for example. A car.
A cat. No, sorry. A car stuck in a tree would be real.
Do you know why I said that? It's because I overemphasised firefighter, and I wasn't meant to.
There you go.
And then I thought, fire truck. I'm digging my hole deeper here.
We're excited about the next
Go back
story.
up. Go back up.
Let's forget this ever
Sophie,
happened. We're going to start again.
Sophie's going to read this. Guys, scroll back up to the top of the story, please.
Right, just forget that happened.
Just cut that out altogether.
Just cut that out. It's not live, is it?
OK.
Anyway, we've all heard about firefighters being called to rescue a cat stuck in a tree.
But emergency crews in New York got more than they'd bargained for when they were called to rescue a bear stuck in a tree.
Now, the images of this are actually quite something, right? So this is in New York. It's in the Albany neighbourhood. Can't even watch.
They caught it. There's a net.
It's fine. It was still moving the net. It seemed uninjured. It was licking its front paws, apparently. So it's all good. It's all fine. Don't worry about the bear. But, yeah, quite extraordinary. It's going to be transported and released back into the wild. So that is the bear. I guess it must just climbed up there.
Yeah, I mean, that is the wild threat, I guess. Obviously, they don't typically come in Albany to the town. But there we go. We're out of time. We'll be right back.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Good morning, it is 9 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Rich and Frost.
We're serving well for a very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
The cost of the war in Iran. UK inflation jumps as Lufthansa cancels 20,000 flights, blaming the price of jet fuel.
It comes as a ceasefire between the US and Iran is extended, but the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked and peace talks are cancelled.
Pressure mounts on the Prime Minister, who will face another day of questions on the Peter Mandelson vetting process.
Later this hour, we're going to be talking to the former boss of NATO, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, about whether he thinks the relationship between Trump and Europe will survive.
We'll also be discussing a new film about Michael Jackson's rise to stardom, which has drawn criticism for not telling the full story.
Good morning. Welcome to the programme. Well, we're seeing evidence of the economic impact of the war in the Middle East. Inflation for the month of March came in this morning at 3.3%. And there's a very real impact in the airline industry too. Lufthansa announcing it's cutting 20,000 short-haul flights this summer.
Yeah, it blamed the cost on jet fuel, which it says it's more than doubled, as well as labour disputes within its workforce. But really just another example of the impact of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. We can talk now to our business and economics correspondent, Paul Kelsey, who is here. So inflation's up a bit, but I guess the worry is that this is just the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So consumer price inflation, the measure we look at most for March, full month of the conflict impacting on the data, rose to 3.3%, so up 0.3%. Remember, the expectation before the war is we'd be getting closer to that dotted red line of the Bank of England's target of 2%. It was starting to come down, inflation, but any thoughts of that being prolonged have been ended by the war. The driver of the inflation, the primary one, literally the driver, is fuel. Petrol and diesel costs. Anyone who's filled up a car knows that. Transport costs as a whole up nearly 5% in the month, and it doesn't just impact us as individual consumers and the cost of getting around. It seeps into every corner of the economy because so much of the goods we buy and that are sold move by road. Haulage costs have soared. So this is always going to be the first measure to show up in the data, and it has. I've been out speaking to various companies in the economy about how they've been affected, speaking to a big fruit and veg importer operating in Kent. A lot of stuff coming up from southern Europe at this time of year. If you want fresh salad, vegetables, lots of it comes through them. They talked about the enormous impact they've faced when I spoke to them.
Energy prices have risen substantially. So you've got electricity alone, which is roughly 30% higher than what we originally forecasted. We've got gas, which is nearly 60% higher than what was originally forecasted at the beginning of the year. We will absorb as much as we can. For a short conflict in the Middle East, we would have absorbed the cost. Energy prices, petrochemical industries, they're all seeing the ramification of it. And yes, costs are increasing. Unfortunately, as much as we don't want to pass costs on, there will be some element of cost increase.
Paul, you're wearing quite a lot of protective gear for a salad manufacturer.
It's dangerous work.
Yeah, sweet little gem lettuces, you can't be too. That wasn't a fruit and veg importer. That is a steelworks in Cardiff, which leads us neatly onto the second shoe that is yet to drop, which is energy prices. Right, oil and gas prices have gone up. We're feeling it immediately in fuel. The next one is going to be energy costs. Households protected by the consumer price cap. No price cap for industry. The costs he was talking about there, about the massive input costs for steel, particularly. That plant takes 40% of Cardiff's energy alone. They can't avoid these prices, and they
40% of the whole of
the
Cardiff?
whole city's energy.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it takes a lot of energy to make steel, and those they can't do anything about them. They've also got 400 lorries a day. They've all got more expensive. Those costs are coming down the track the longer this goes on. Obviously, this is of interest to the Chancellor. We have had a reaction from Rachel Reeves, who's used the line that's become a little bit familiar when it comes to the economics of this situation. This is not our war, she said, but it is pushing up bills for families and businesses. That's why it's my number one priority to keep costs down. Our economic plan is the right one and has put us in a stronger position to support families in the face of this new crisis. Now, she did mention some of the measures they've taken. Rail fares have been frozen. There have been some measures to take some money out of energy bills. But this is a new and pretty unexpected reality for the Chancellor. Not her war, but it is her problem.
Tell us about the Lufthansa news.
Yeah, this is another reflection of price pressure. Lufthansa, massive European airline, it's cancelled 20,000 flights and over the next few months, and it's done that it says very plainly to save 40,000 tonnes of jet fuel, which has doubled in cost. So they can still get the fuel, and there are concerns that might not remain the case the longer this crisis goes on. But this is an enormous company, so I'm saying this is uneconomic. Some of these flights were loss-making. They're looking to optimise the seats they really and the planes they really need to send and try and protect their summer schedules. I suspect this won't be the last news from airlines. And when it comes to that question between price, which we're feeling, we've talked about it at the pumps, in airline prices, price is one thing, supply is the next question, because that supply is choked off. The last deliveries of oil from the Gulf have landed in Europe, and it feels like the order of stress is going to be jet fuel first, then diesel, then petrol. At the moment, everyone stresses there's plenty of fuel at the pumps, but the longer this goes on, the more these questions and the price impact will be felt.
Paul, great stuff. Thanks so much.
We asked for your reaction to some of the costs we're seeing coming through. We've had an awful lot of emails as well. This one from Julie. She was talking a bit about, in reaction to our interview that we did with the hairdresser on Businesses Struggling, saying that her daughter's worked at the same beauty salon for nearly 11 years. And then saying that on Saturday, her boss gave them a letter to say she was closing with immediate effect. And she cited some government measures, so, you know, business taxes, national insurance, but also the cost of electricity as well. It's really, really feeding through and being felt in all kinds of different areas.
Yeah. By the way, I'd just say, you know, to Paul's very accurate point, you know, that it seeps through to all the economy. It doesn't seep through yet. So this first month, which has seen inflation go from 3% in February to 3.3% in March, is sort of before the knock-on effects where businesses hike their prices, and then we ask for bigger wage increases, and it sort of starts to really build from there. You know, we didn't, in 2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine was February. We didn't see inflation peak until the end of that year. Obviously, it peaked at a much higher level, and that's not expected this time round. So, you know, if this war persists, this is the start of it.
Brace.
Not the peak of it.
Yeah, brace yourself, basically. And all that, of course, dependent on what happens with the peace talks, what happens with the war as well. All that increased pressure on costs feeds through with those events. And earlier, Donald Trump announced the ceasefire between the US and Iran is being extended. He announced it just before it was due to expire.
It was a confusing picture in Washington because J.D. Vance was due to travel to Pakistan, and late last night they confirmed that trip wasn't going ahead. Let's get straight out to Cordy, who's in Pakistan for us in the capital, Islamabad. And Cordy, it's interesting because, you know, the fact the Vice President isn't flying with the hopes that had been built up and the importance of these peace talks, you know, we could have expected a much greater fallout, whether we're talking about oil prices moving higher or bombs dropping, but we haven't had that.
I think what is really important to point out is that we've not seen a return to fighting, to hostilities, and that was the concern. Diplomacy is still going on, but it's hanging by a thread, and the prospect of diplomatic talks here in Islamabad currently look like they're on ice. I think distrust is running incredibly high between Iran and America, but all is not destroyed quite yet. What I think is absolutely critical, though, is the US blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran says until that comes to an end, they will not return to any kind of meaningful discussion about an agreement between the two parties. Currently, Donald Trump says he is not willing to do that. Privately, it's unclear what discussions are happening behind closed doors. Yesterday was a frantic day of diplomacy. The hope was that by the US and Vice President making his way here, it would bring Iran over too, that they would come. But I think Iran has said, we are not going to surrender. They don't want the optics of some kind of capitulation. And we heard today from the advisor to the Iranian parliamentary speaker. He's the lead negotiator on these talks. And he says that Donald Trump's ceasefire is not an honest one, that it could well be really just a cloak for an intention for a surprise strike, that they're just hiding, really, their intentions further down the line. And so that's the dynamic that we're working through here. And the Iranian leadership is still quite a muddy picture. Who is it that America can negotiate with? I think their confidence is certainly being frayed. But we haven't seen a return to bombing just yet. America has brought some time with Iran here to try and talk this through. It feels unlikely that anything will happen in person here in Islamabad. Not entirely impossible, but I think a lot of the work is going to be done behind the scenes without anyone getting on a plane.
Cordy, great stuff as always. Thanks so much. Cordy will be waiting for the Vice President and the Iranians. Hopefully they will arrive for those peace talks in the days ahead.
We did just want to tell you as well about an interview we're doing later this hour. The former NATO Secretary-General, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, he'll be talking about the war and its impact as well.
Now, Keir Starmer will face another round of questions about the Peter Mandelson vetting scandal today after a hugely damaging day of evidence from the former chief of the Foreign Office yesterday.
Well, yesterday, Sir Ollie Robbins described an atmosphere of pressure in the process of vetting Peter Mandelson, said that Number 10 had taken a dismissive approach to the whole thing. Let's just listen to some of what he said.
The handover briefing I was getting as I arrived at post was what I felt was a generally dismissive attitude to his vetting clearance. The focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. A position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson.
Well, a little earlier, we spoke to the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Emily Thornberry, who said it was right that Ollie Robbins was sacked as the Foreign Office's top civil servant.
It would be much easier if Ollie Robbins had made notes, of, you know, this is the conversation I've had, you know, we've had all these phone calls, you know, make a note of all the phone calls from Number 10. You know, was it right that they were having daily phone calls? Where is the evidence of that? The evidence of, can you give another mate of mine a job? Matthew Doyle. Where's the note on that? I mean, this is what civil servants do. Civil servants do make a note when they make themselves a cup of tea. I mean, they do make notes, and yet with Ollie Robbins, there aren't any notes. I'm not saying I'm not sympathetic. I'm not saying that he's been through a very difficult time, but if you were to ask me, do I think that in all the circumstances it was right for him to lose his job? I think actually it was. But, you know, I mean, he should never have been put into that position.
It feels like she says that actually both sides have done something wrong here.
Yeah, and that's where I think this latest episode is actually getting quite complicated. And what a lot of MPs are saying, or I think maybe they hope to believe, is that this part of it isn't cutting through to people at home because we're talking about process here. But I think what's crucial in what Emily Thornberry was saying there was not that Ollie Robbins was right to lose her job, that's her opinion, but she said there about he should never have been put into that position in the first place. And this is where one of the revelations yesterday was quite shocking, was this constant claim from Ollie Robbins that pressure was being put on him by Downing Street. He said it was never a question of whether or not Mandelson should get the job, it was a question of when. So there is criticism of Downing Street here, and while the Prime Minister consistently maintains that he didn't mislead the House of Commons, a full process was followed, and he will stress that again today, according to sources in Downing Street. But it's about the fact that this was a political appointment, and people have criticised the fact he should never have done it in the first place.
But I did think it was really interesting, because, you know, Emily Thornberry was overlooked for cabinet positions. She has spoken up quite a few times against the government on quite a few issues. And she said it was accurate, right, that Robbins lost his job and that Keir Starmer shouldn't lose his, which, you know, OK, she's not a Conservative, she's not in the opposition, but I thought that was quite significant, that that was her ultimate conclusion of all of this.
It was, but what was striking, I thought, in that was that she did criticise Keir Starmer's judgment. And again, when you speak to MPs, particularly about how people at home will perceive this, how voters will perceive it, people say that this again comes back to Keir Starmer's judgment, the way that he manages his team in Downing Street, the way that, and Emily Thornberry said this, the way that he delegates decisions. So you're right, well, she kind of came out and said it's not the right time to replace Keir Starmer. Pat McFadden said exactly the same thing. Neither of them are coming out strongly fighting for the Prime Minister. There's no real conviction necessarily. I think people are all agreed that local elections are coming up now isn't the right time to replace Keir Starmer. But are people convinced by his leadership. I'm not really getting the sense at the moment that they are.
There's one final piece in this puzzle that I feel is missing, and that is Sir Philip Barton, who was the guy who was in that job before Ollie Robbins, and he left 8 months early. And Emily Thornberry told us today that he was put under pressure by Number 10. We haven't heard from him. Let's just listen to what Emily Thornberry had to say.
It should never have been announced, in December under the previous Permanent Undersecretary. And I know that he was put under a huge amount of pressure.
You talk about Philip Barton here.
Yeah.
Are you worried about maybe because he left, didn't he?
He left 8 months early.
Do you think that's a bit suspicious, I guess?
I don't know why. I've heard of some of the pressure that he was put under. I've heard of a direct phone call from Morgan McSweeney to Philip Barton, where Morgan McSweeney swore at him and told him to get on with it. So that is a huge amount of pressure. And I know that Morgan McSweeney denies it, but that's what we've heard.
I guess we pushed her to say she's going to call for Philip Barton to come in front of the committee, and she refused to say that. But I think the implication is
yes.
The answer is yes. Yeah. I mean, the problem, I guess, for Downing Street is that drags this out and gives another focal point for everyone, whether it's days or weeks or months ahead.
Yeah, and again, one of the criticisms of the way Downing Street has responded to this is that this is no longer necessarily about the process. It's how Downing Street has responded. It's that straight after these latest revelations came out in The Guardian, Number 10 decided to come out fighting, picking a war with the Foreign Office. So now what you're left with is all of these conversations about the processes, who knew what when, and as a result, a lot of questions that people feel Keir Starmer and others around him now need to answer. So as you say, instead of this being buried away, finishing today, it's now going to continue and keep unravelling, and that's why it will continue to be problematic, a defining decision of Keir Starmer's time in Downing Street.
Lucy, thanks so much. Now, the number of strip searches, of children in England has fallen by more than half since 2020. But the Children's Commissioner is warning there are ongoing safeguarding failures.
So she's released this report today that found that strip searching does remain widespread and that there are also racial disparities. She highlights a third of searches are of children who had previously been subjected to a strip search as well.
Let's bring in Oliver's got more on these details for us. What's the latest, Oliver?
So this report covers the period up to the year of June 2024. And although the numbers have fallen by 56% in terms of children being strip searched in England, there were still 377 strip searches that took place. So that means, on average, there was at least one child every day in England who was being subjected to a strip search. And, of course, this all came to prominence after that case back in 2020 that a lot of people will remember, where a 15-year-old schoolgirl was taken out of an exam. She was on her period, so a very intimate search was carried out at a vulnerable time for her. And it was all under the wrongful suspicion that she had cannabis on her person. That was then proved not to be the case, and 2 Met police officers lost their jobs for gross misconduct. But although the Children's Commissioner here says, yeah, there has been some signs of progress being made, she still says a lot of these searches are unnecessary, they're unsafe, and a lot of them are going underreported.
Have we had any response from the police at all on this? Do we know what they say? Or
So the National Police Chiefs Council is launching a consultation to change the way that these laws are used, the way that these searches are carried out. We have had a response from the Home Office, and the Home Office says we're introducing extensive safeguards for children and young people for strip searching and bringing in reforms to drive up standards in policing, improve vetting and tackle misconduct. But there's still a long way to go, according to the Children's Commissioner, and there's this huge disparity between the way that black children and white children are treated when it comes to stop and search. So not necessarily the strip searching, but black children are 5 times more likely to be subjected to stop and search than white children. And what the Children's Commissioner is saying here is white children, when they're stopped and searched, it's generally because there's concerns for their mental health. With black children, it's because of their build, their physique, the way that they look. And she says that is just completely unacceptable.
Oliver, great stuff. Thanks so much. And we are going to be speaking to the Children's Commissioner for England, Dame Rachel de Souza. That's coming up at 9:30.
We're also going to be talking to the former West Midlands Mayor, Sir Andy Street. He, I'm sure, will have a few things to say about inflation figures. He used to be the head of John Lewis as well.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighbourhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming. It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Good to have you with us. So we're joined now by the former Conservative Mayor of the West Midlands, also the former MD of John Lewis, Sir Andy Street. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Sophie. Lovely to be here.
I'm interested to start on the economy, if I can. You've got such experience, like being at the sharp end of the economy, you know, running a business. Inflation figures out today, and they are up. How worried are you about the state of the economy and the impact of the war?
So you're right. There is an impact of the war on inflation, and we can see that this morning, 3.3% increase. And if I was running John Lewis at the moment, I'd be thinking about how are our prices going to move through the rest of the year, because you've got inflation in the supply chain. Almost every product that someone like John Lewis sells has energy as a big proportion of its cost. So I would definitely be looking at that. But I think there's a much wider picture here, because people are feeling less well off, not just because of the inflation numbers this morning, but all the other pressures, some of which have been long time in the making. So if you look at people's getting pay rises maybe in April, but not feeling it in their pay packet because taxes are going up at the same time. People facing potential mortgage rate increases. So you stand back and you say, how are we going to solve those underlying issues? And the only answer has to be proper, genuine growth. And so it's not just the short-term effect there, it's looking at some of the more deep-seated issues that we've got to do.
And what is the impact of that going to be, do you think, on... You know, we talked to a hairdresser, for example, this morning, saying that they're all closing. There's lots of hairdressers having to close down. You've got big businesses like John Lewis. You've got others that, you know, operate on these very tight margins. What could we see on the high street?
Business taxation is really hurting. If you are a pub or a small retailer on a high street, you've probably got a big increase in business rates for this April. That will definitely cause casualties. And, of course, the increase in national insurance contributions is also affecting the cost of employing people, particularly young people, given how it was done. So there are real consequences there. But you've got to say, where can you restart? Where's the dynamo? So I would be looking at where you can reduce business taxation, particularly around investment and employment, to actually get business back driving the economy.
And you talk about growth. I mean, what can you do there? What are the things that you would be doing now?
Well, one of the big issues, and one of the things that drives the economy faster than anything usually, is actually accelerating the housing market, actually the growth there. Construction, it employs a lot of people, it doesn't import. So what can be done actually to help the building industry and construction industry? That's really critical. So planning reform, of course, lots of taxes that are hidden there, lots of regulation. So you actually have to stand back and say, how do you change all of that?
Let's talk politics, shall we? Local elections coming up. What are your predictions?
So
you're Conservative, obviously, but
yes.
I feel like you are a bit more, perhaps, frank than some of the ministers we get in the chair.
Hopefully I can be honest, but the big picture, it's easy for a Conservative to say, because the big picture is, of course, we're going to see Labour being punished, really, around the country. The Labour vote is very, very soft. Lots of people who voted Labour in 24, now very disappointed. But the interesting thing is the beneficiaries of that will be very different in different places. So, of course, in Wales, it looks like success for Plaid. In Scotland, it looks like success for the SNP. And in England, different parts of the country vote very differently. So we'll probably hear the Lib Dems, Reform and the Greens all claiming victory in different places. That will be true, as the elections were last held in 22. But, of course, the thing I'll be very interested in, what does it say about the Conservative vote? And this is perhaps the bit where I might surprise you, because yes, we will probably lose seats compared to 22 before the real downturn in Conservative fortune. But I think you will see just the beginning of the recovery for the Conservative Party, particularly in London, probably in Birmingham. I think we'll defend those magnificent councils in the West Midlands that we run, Solihull, Walsall, Dudley, you know, the only metropolitan councils, Conservative. And so we'll be actually saying, what is it about competent Conservative leadership, not dogmatic, but very principled, very focused on delivery, and how does that enable us to continue to grow?
I mean, the story is going to be, though, isn't it, that Reform, it's the Greens, it's some of the, like, say, nationalist parties picking up those Labour votes, not the Conservatives. That's the story.
Of course it is, but you asked me to perhaps look a little bit beyond that headline, and you will, I think, see the seeds of Conservative recovery. But one other prediction, Sophie. Reform, yes, they will gain, of course they will, but I'm prepared to predict today they will not do as well as they did last year, and we will actually conclude on the 8th of May that the high watermark of Reform has passed, and that will be a good thing.
OK, well, we'll have to wait and see to see if that prediction is correct or not. You're, I think, optimistic there about the Conservatives, but you set up, of course, this new political movement with Ruth Davidson, former leader of the Scottish Conservatives, you know, trying to appeal to people who are politically homeless. Since then, you're saying that you're going to see the green shoots of recovery, that Kemi Badenoch's approval rating's going up a bit. I mean, was it all a bit of a waste of time then,
No,
this
far
new
from
movement?
it, because actually...
Stick with the old guys.
No, what the results will show is actually it's the type of things that are leading to Conservative success. And I described it as that very non-dogmatic centre-ground piece. And what's going to happen in these results is you're already seeing it. There is a huge space opening up for this centre-right agenda. People who are not attracted to the populists of the left and the right, but actually do want, and think of the first question you asked me, they want really sensible answers to the big issues. That's why we're doing Prosper UK, and actually the election results are going to prove the ground is there for us.
Have you spoken to Kemi Badenoch since setting it up?
Yes, briefly after the setup.
Is she annoyed with you, or...?
I think she and her team understand very well that the Conservative Party have got to be broad in its appeal, and we can help broaden the Conservative Party. And by the way, all the research we're doing can be open and offered to other people as well. And nothing would be better than those ideas being taken on by others. But the primary target is to get the Conservatives to adopt our policy positions.
There was something else I wanted to ask you about in light of the Mandelson saga that we've seen and the Matthew Doyle, the suggestion that Keir Starmer, or Number 10, asked for an ambassadorship for Matthew Doyle as former Director of Communications. You've always been a slight outsider in Westminster, I think it's fair to say. You come from a business background, right? And I think perhaps what is damaging about this story is the impression that it's kind of like jobs for your mates a bit, like people who are former SPADs, who've worked with you, who've been drinking with for 20 years. Is that a problem with Westminster's culture, and have you experienced it yourself, do you think?
it is definitely a problem with Westminster's culture. One of the reasons, again, that Prosper has been set up is about a new way of doing politics. We don't want just to be part of the Yaboo sucks jobs for the boys piece, to use your word there. We actually want to respect voters and say, let's bring forward practical answers. And you stand back from the whole debate about Mandelson and yesterday, and you have to say it's a pretty grim situation where the Prime Minister and the civil service are like that. One of the things that's supposed to define the way we do government in Britain is the way in which the civil service does not become the story, and the politicians definitely do not question the integrity of civil servants. So it's a pretty grim situation.
Is it too hard for outsiders to get into politics, whether you're like, businessman or whatever it is?
It is hard. There's very few people who've made the journey that I have. He says slightly modestly, my apologies, from business to politics. But hopefully my journey in the West Midlands proved that it could be done. And it's interesting. I do think the mayoral role is one that lends itself to drawing other people in, actually. The business background is actually perfect for that type of executive leadership. So hopefully it can broaden the pool of politicians.
Finally, Coventry, promoted to the Premier League. You must be pleased.
I was there last night at the Coventry Building Society Arena, and wow, it was an incredible celebration. 25 years since they were last in the Premier League. But the wonderful thing is, it's owned by a local business person who has done a fantastic job, obviously a remarkable team effort, wonderful job by the manager as well, and the whole city got behind. And, of course, they were one of the teams that I tried to support when I was mayor. So, yeah, a great day for Coventry, and let's see how they get on in the Premier League.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Great to have you on. Thank you very much, Andy Strait, talking to us there. Coming up next, we are going to be talking about some of the wider impact of the war in Iran. Wolf is going to be talking to former Secretary-General of NATO. That's coming up.
Welcome back. The number of strip searches of children in England has fallen by more than half since 2020, but there are still safeguarding failures.
Well, a report released today has found that it does remain quite widespread, and there are some quite stark racial disparities going on as well. We can talk now to the Children's Commissioner for England, Dame Brentford D'Souza, who joins us now. First up, what are we talking about here? In what kind of situations are these used?
Look, I got involved in this 5 years ago when a little girl, Child Q, was strip searched in her school. She was sitting in a classroom and she was, her head teacher said that she smelled drugs on her. Instead of calling for the parents, she was taken into a room by police officers and strip searched. She was on her period. It was a terrible story. And I committed to her, I would find out how many other children this happened to and try and get it stopped. And I wouldn't stop until it stopped. So I used my data powers first on the Met Police, then on all of police areas in England to find out how many children were strip searched and where and whether the rules were kept. And at first, it was dreadful because none of this data was being collected by the Home Office. So I was having to sort out some police areas' data. It was so bad. And we found children being strip searched outside chicken shops, children being strip searched against the rules by the wrong gender, by the wrong, a male police officer when it's a girl and the other way around. Anyway, it's been getting better. And this year, I collected the data and it's halved. And the Met are leading the way. So I'm going to give them praise where praise is due.
Fair play.
But what I do say to Mark Rowley is you now need to lead the other areas to show them how to reduce this. And just to be clear, a strip search is an intrusive search. So there were 22,000 stop and searches. That's different. That's where you're, frisking for a knife or you're worried about something like that. This is clothes off. And one 19-year-old boy put it to me. He said, I was a little boy. I got taken for a strip search. They said, get all your clothes off, bend over. He said, then three officers, he said, I felt they were laughing. Now, you and I know they might have been laughing because they were nervous, right? But he felt they were laughing at him. He was humiliated. And he said it was the start of a dreadful relationship with the police. My argument is there is a much better way of dealing with this. And there are things we can do. I've been trying to get the Home Office and the police to do this. And at last, we have some really good data to show it's coming down.
So it's coming down, it's half, great. But there are still, as Sophie mentioned in the intro, some terrible racial disparities in this.
And I think this is interesting. So 2 things. One is you are 8 times more likely now to be strip searched if you're black, 5 times if you're Asian. And the strange thing is it doesn't map across high crime areas. So our worst places now are places like Hertfordshire or the South East. So it's not, everyone there's black, so it's different. So the racial disparity is there. We need to be really, really mindful of this and sort this. And actually, in stop and search, you're 5 times more likely to be stop and searched if you're black. But this, strip searching, 8 times more likely, and not in the obvious places. The second thing that sits with this is 30% of the children strip searched last year been strip searched more than once. Now, as a former head teacher in a children's commission, that is a massive red flag. The first time this happens, there should be a huge intervention into, what can we do if the child has committed a crime to divert them from it or to make sure everything's all right and this doesn't happen again. So 2 big issues for me there.
I really well remember the case of that girl, the girl who was pulled out of the exam on a period on suspicion of having cannabis on her, which she did not have. I mean, it was unbelievable, and it's right that there has been a reaction to that. I guess my question is, do you accept that in some instances strip search, even of children, is necessary or not?
I have said that, and I've always said this, that if it's a matter of life and death, of course. If you think the child is going to harm themselves or harm others, and you think it's really a serious matter of life and death, of course. And I've never. But what I do say is we need to. There's still way too many of these without a record of who's done it, where it's done. Do you know? I've surveyed 1 million children in my time as Children's Commissioner, and they all tell me they want the police to be tough. They want the police to protect them. The thing they're most afraid of is knife crime. But they also want the police they want to trust the police. They want the police to be good. And I think this is one of those practices where we need the police, if they're going to do it, to just be exceptional in terms of keeping the rules. We hold them to a high standard.
Thank you. As we always say on this, you are such a powerful voice for children. You do so much work, highlighting these issues. So it's always a real pleasure to have you on the programme. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dame Rachel D'Souza. Now, there's been a bit of breaking news in the last hour from the Strait of Hormuz. The UK Maritime Trade Operations Centre say that 2 ships have been fired at by Iran, which of course further complicates the picture when it comes to the ceasefire and possible peace talks. Oil prices, for reference, basically at $100 a barrel again for Brent, up again today. Joining me now is the former NATO Secretary-General, Anders Fogh Rasmussen. Thank you so much for joining us. Lots to get to with you today, including some questions on space, which I know you want to talk about. But first of all, just on the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, how worried are you when you see that the proposed peace talks have been postponed?
I am very much concerned. It will have a serious impact on the world economy, and I foresee this conflict will be dragging out, and the consequences will be severe, not least when it comes to energy prices.
Clearly, at the same time, the ceasefire was extended by President Trump. It's not like we've seen an immediate return to heavy bombing by the US of Iran. How important is it that that holds? And what is your assessment of the likelihood of significant military hostilities picking up again, particularly in light of these breaking stories of Iranian vessels firing on commercial ships this morning?
I think both parties, both Iran and the US, have an interest in not resuming military attacks and activities. And that's exactly why I think this will be dragging out. It's not easy to achieve a diplomatic result in the near term. So I think the world is now confronted with a conflict that will be a very long conflict.
Clearly, nobody wants the Strait of Hormuz to be closed in the long term. Can you understand the US tactic to blockade it themselves in the short term?
Yeah, well, I understand the US reasoning, but I think time has come now to review the American and also the European strategy. Trump made a strategic mistake by launching this war without informing his allies. Europe made a strategic mistake by declaring that this war is not our war. But the fact is, we are all feeling the consequences, so we are in this together. I think Europe should stand up now and tell Trump in very clear terms, we will help you out of this mess, provided that you will stop imposing tariffs on your allies, and provided that you will stay engaged in Europe, in NATO, and you will continue to support Ukraine.
I mean, it's maybe an optimistic ask on the tariffs, but what can Europe immediately, in the short term, offer the US to help them out of this mess, realistically?
I think we have all a strong interest in ensuring free navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. That's an international obligation, and I think Europe should assist the Americans in enforcing such free navigation in the Strait of Hormuz.
So essentially you're saying that all of Europe's navies should partake in some kind of peacekeeping force and put military lives at risk in the region?
Well, it remains to be seen exactly how that should be executed. My point is just this. It's too easy to declare this war is not our war. It's too easy to say we will only engage when hostilities is over, because that may be down the road, it may take a long time. I think we need quick actions, and I would encourage the Europeans to take such quick actions. The fact is, Trump is now in a self-inflicted mess. And we should take the opportunity to help him out of this mess and use it as a leverage to restore more normal transatlantic relations. Time has come to stand up, to speak directly to Trump. The time for flattery is over.
I guess what you're already implying is that the US and Europe aren't close friends or allies to the extent in the past. Is NATO, as it was when you led it, over?
It's not over, but it has changed. And the fact that the American president has raised doubts about his commitment to NATO and his commitment to European defense makes it clear that we in Europe should do much more to defend ourselves. So our conclusion should be we need a new European security architecture built upon a coalition of the willing. And my argument would be that we need to include Ukraine in that coalition of the willing, because Ukraine today could be a valuable asset for a new European security architecture. Ukraine could and should serve as a bulwark against an aggressive Russia.
It's interesting timing for you as well to be announcing the report on the Global Space Council report launch, looking for global allegiance for the rules of space, particularly militarily going forward. Are you optimistic that can be achieved? I mean, it's not just talking about tensions within NATO; it would have to include countries like Russia and China too.
Well, the point in the report we are launching today is that we need rules that ensure equitable access to space. We cannot allow monopolization of space by private American actors that make Europe too weak and too dependent on the US. So we need a robust regulation to ensure equitable access to space. Furthermore, we need Europe to step up its production of satellites, and we also need more European launchers of satellites. Time has come to stand on our own feet. We have to reduce our dependence on the US when it comes to space.
But I guess on that, again, I use the same word, optimistic. I mean, we're quite dependent on the US for defence. When it comes to space, we're entirely dependent, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely. The US has 10 times as many satellites as Europe. So it's high time, but I appreciate very much that the EU has focused much more on space. And I would strongly favor security cooperation between the UK and the European Union when it comes also to space.
Anders, we're out of time, sadly, but it's been great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Anders Fogh Rasmussen, I mean, big takeaway, this is going to be long and protracted.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the Iran war part, not the space part.
It feels like the last kind of 6 months or so has been such a wake-up call for so many people across the world, but particularly, I guess, across Europe as well, and lots of minds trying to work out the implication of all that.
By the way, just as we've been speaking, Brent crude has crossed $100 a barrel again. It's now up 2% today. Of course, we brought you that news before the interview that there have been some shots fired, not hitting targets, but shots fired on 2 commercial vessels over the course of the morning in and around the Strait, and takes oil prices back above 100. Saying at the start of the show, this last week's range has been 90 on the best day, 100 on the worst. We're back to the worst. Reminder, we started the year at 60.
Well, we're going to keep talking about that. We're going to keep talking about all the economic and consumer impacts that we're all going to feel as well. But in the meantime, let's look, shall we, at the weather.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
So the high pressure will keep the weather mostly settled over the next few days, and it's going to be a bit warmer as well, so a bit of good news at least on the weather front. Most places will have a dry and sunny morning after a bit of a chilly start. There will be some low cloud around though. North East Scotland, Cornwall and the southwest of Ireland look most at risk of grey skies. It will turn out warmer than yesterday, but it will feel cool again in the brisk wind across the south and for North Sea coast as well. The hills of the southwest England will see gusts up to 60 miles an hour, so pretty windy there.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, a new film about Michael Jackson opens in cinemas today, and it's already got a lot of people talking.
So it follows the singer's rise to stardom, but this is why people are talking, because it doesn't make a reference to allegations that he sexually abused children, which obviously, you know, those allegations and the scandal really dominated the final years of his life.
A warning: this report from Katie Spencer contains flash photography.
17 years after his death, a new Michael Jackson movie is coming out. And if forecasters have got it right, it could gross $1 billion. Because in spite of allegations of child sexual abuse, in the last decade, Jackson's global popularity has not waned. From jukebox musicals to Spotify streams, when the singer died, he was reportedly hundreds of millions in debt. Today, his estate is valued at $2 billion.
Just have all these songs in my head.
Jafar Jackson, Michael's nephew, has earned quite a bit of praise for his performance in the new film, with the family executors heavily involved behind the scenes. It is a story emphasising Jackson's loneliness, childhood trauma and talent, skirting around the controversy by stopping at the height of his fame.
The film's original third act reportedly had included some abuse allegations, but that section had to be cut and reshot when lawyers pointed out that past legal settlements prevented all parties from talking about what did or didn't go on. With such a narrow lens on Jackson's life, there are plenty of people who hate the idea that the film will undoubtedly revive and reshape his public image.
Not least the woman who commissioned the Leaving Neverland documentary about these two men, Wade Robson and James Safechuk, detailing their alleged childhood sexual abuse by Jackson and the psychological aftermath. Former Channel 4 boss Dorothy Byrne says Hollywood should be ashamed.
It's wrong to even listen to his music, never mind go and see a film, because people are making money out of this. And that's what you have to say to yourself. You wouldn't go and see a film about Jimmy Savile that was all about him running marathons. You shouldn't go and see a film about Michael Jackson, the singer, because he's not just Michael Jackson, the singer. This film is not telling you the truth about him.
Jackson's posthumous earnings have relied on dismissing the allegations of child sex abuse, which the singer denied in life and which his executors have contested since. While we might live in the age of cancel culture, when it comes to Jackson, because his music is so beloved, is the truth that a lot of people just don't want to hear it, mentally splitting the music from the person because it's intertwined with our formative years.
Michael Jackson is the biggest star of the universe and always has been and always will be. If you start getting rid of music that's made by artists who have behaved horribly, then you're getting rid of everybody from James Brown to Wagner. Most people are sophisticated and they know if they go to see a movie, they might go, oh, this is not quite right, or there's more to the story, even though I enjoyed the movie. And then they can find out by researching this.
It is a lot harder, impossible, some might argue, to unlike music you've grown up singing along to. But when it's an artist whose life was so mired in controversy, critics argue it's wrong to buy a ticket to a movie which paints him as a character deserving of our sympathy, but stops short of taking in the alleged trauma Jackson inflicted on others. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Now, there were some pretty striking pictures, shall we say, coming in from
You're going to do this
New
one.
York. I'm going to do this one.
I haven't got a good track record.
We'll explain why later, but just to tell you the story first. So there was a bear stuck up a tree. There he is, which is a pretty alarming thing to say. The fire brigade were called and they did manage to rescue him. But watch this, because this is going to be a heart-in-your-mouth moment when he falls out the tree.
Onto that net, thankfully.
Onto the net. Oh! I mean, it makes you gasp. The good news is he was uninjured. He was licking his paws afterwards. He's been released. You can see him there, so all good.
Sweet bear as well. That doesn't look too big and scary.
Although I wouldn't fancy that on a tree outside my house.
No, sure. But at least he didn't... Well, he was looking quite relaxed, wasn't he?
Well, luckily he was OK. We made a slight mistake.
I did. Sweet of you to say we.
We're in it together.
I can't read it. Do you know, my reading's not been very good today. You might say not just today.
So the script was the script managed to say a cat was stuck in a tree. It's a bit of a joke to say it's normally a cat stuck in a tree. We said a car stuck in the tree. But we just wanted to bring you this email that we had in.
That I wasn't entirely wrong.
Wilfred, I'm a retired police officer from Northamptonshire, and I can think of at least 2 occasions when the fire brigade assisted with cars stuck in trees.
It does happen.
Thank you very much.
How? I don't know.
We don't know.
It does happen.
But I love that, and there you go. Well done, Wilf.
Thank you very much.
I've got more questions about how the car ended up in the tree.
Nice policeman from Northamptonshire. Saving the day. We have a little bit left on the programme. I'm just going to return to the oil price just as we wrap up. Of course, this is the day that we got inflation data for the month of March. It came in at 3.3%. February, January had been 3%. Oil prices back at $100 a barrel for Brent, so rising only 1.5% a day. But they rose yesterday, of course, on news of those peace talks breaking down, back to $100 on oil.
Yeah, so we've got indicators, inflation, oil prices moving in the wrong direction, I'm afraid to say. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for being with us today.